Hey, welcome to J Reviews. I got a big treat for you this time. Today I'm reviewing all 3 of the Skate or Die games for NES. We got a lot of games to go through, so let's cut right to the chase. First up, we have Skate or Die. So this is Skate or Die, or should I say Skate Your Die, complete with its chaotic menu music. Hit start and it takes you to the skate shop where this Mohawk Rodney Dangerfield apparently works. There isn't much to do here besides registering your name for high scores and selecting practice or compete, which honestly do pretty much the same thing except that any points earned in practice mode doesn't get saved as a high score, so you might as well just choose compete every time. Being a skateboarding game, it's sort of weird that you move a cursor around the shop to select things rather than just having a normal menu. It's similar to those old point and click games like Uninvited, and it's also an early warning for just how ambitious this game is. Once you sign up and select compete, you'll be taken to the main hub of the game, which consists of skateboarding to whichever event you want to compete in. You skate by using tank controls, meaning that pressing left and right turns your board, and pressing up makes you go. You also build up speed as you hold up, which helps with, well, it doesn't really help with anything. All the events are just a couple seconds away, and the fact that they took the time to program in this gradual acceleration at the hub is honestly strange. You might say, well, maybe they just took the controls from one of the other events and pasted it into the hub. But you'd be wrong. None of the events play like this. Anyway, on to the first event, Freestyle. Here you're just trying to get points by doing as many tricks as possible. Figuring out how to do anything without instructions is very tricky. Pressing left or right makes you spin in the air. Usually you'd think that you'd simply let go of the button to stop spinning, but it doesn't work like that. You actually continue to spin until you press the other direction to stop. The same goes for up and down, which makes you move back and forth on the ramp. Another odd control choice is how you accelerate. You might think that you hold A to increase your speed on the ramp since your guy ducks down, but instead you actually have to tap A quickly to do so. So I guess the game is telling you that the trick to going faster on a skateboard is to quickly duck over and over again? How would that even work?
Am I doing it right? Am I going faster? I don't think I'm going faster. This is how you go faster, right? You just keep...
The event itself isn't very good. It's possible to do some basic tricks and get points, but you often find yourself struggling with the controls and wiping out. Whoa, he fell so hard all of his clothes flew off. The next event is High Jump. The goal here is pretty simple, to get the highest jump. While it sounds simple, actually figuring out what to do on your own is a pain. Let's see, in the last event you tapped A over and over again to gain speed. And since this event doesn't require tricks, I guess it's safe to assume it would work the same here, right? Well, nope, it doesn't. Tapping A doesn't work, tapping B doesn't work. You can try mashing buttons, but you're still bound to get an awful score. Want to know the trick to going faster? It's alternating the left and right buttons. Wow, so obvious. I should have known. The real kicker though is that you apparently don't just press it as quickly as possible. This fact I read online explaining the instructions tells you to try various methods. Various methods? Okay. After using various methods, I managed to get 6 feet 3 inches. But apparently that wasn't enough. Whatever, I don't need a fact. I'll show you various methods. Here we go, this is it. Alright, next up we have Downhill Jam. This is the event that most closely resembles the hub screen, but like I said earlier, it doesn't play the same. Instead of tank controls, right points you to the right, and left to your left, with down serving as your acceleration when using regular style. There isn't too much to say about this. You're able to jump, duck, punch, and kick. But really all there is to this is racing towards the bottom. Running into bottles gives you points for whatever reason, and a better time means a better score. It's actually very easy. Next we have Downhill Race. This event probably gave me the most trouble figuring out. Which is a shame, considering it looks like it could have been pretty fun. There's all these alternate paths and shortcuts, but the controls are giving me a harder time than ever. For one, the A button seems to be used for everything in this mode. A plus up to jump, A and down to duck, and even A and the left or right button is to steer. Was this really necessary? I mean, there is a B button. Maybe it's just me, but I just can't get a grip on this event at all. It makes me feel like I'm skateboarding in syrup. Ugh, come on. Come on. That's it. I'm gonna get back up there and take the alternate path this time. If I could just get up. Oh, that's right, it's downhill. Wait, what? You could go backwards? Oh god. No. Ugh. Okay, the final event. Joust. I don't suppose it's going to be anything like this Joust, is it? Just the idea of playing Joust seems like a breath of fresh air compared to what I've been playing. So is this event going to be similar to that at all? Nope. This one takes place in an empty swimming pool where two guys take turns knocking each other off of their boards. There isn't a whole lot to say here. You have a few tries to hit your opponent, and then they get a few tries to hit you, rinse and repeat until someone wins. It doesn't control as bad as some of the other events, but it isn't great either. It's okay. So, Skate or Die. It was an okay concept, but a pretty disappointing execution. The main issue was the controls. Well, hopefully they were able to iron things out a bit in the next game. This is Ski or Die. Yeah, I did not make that name up. Alright, Ski or Die. I gotta say, I'm already liking this one better. The menu theme is pretty catchy, and they actually connected the lines to the O and OR this time. I'd call that an improvement. So, this game works pretty much the same way as the last one did. You still have the point-and-click ski shop with Rodney, and the different events to choose from on the hub screen. Of course, this time, you're on skis instead of a skateboard. The controls here are changed a bit as well. You use left and right on the D-pad to turn, and then A to go. It's a simple change, but it actually feels better than the previous game for some reason. The first event is the snowboard halfpipe. Your goal here is to just rack up points by doing tricks and grabbing garden gnomes. Be careful though, because there's also killer snow bunnies with chainsaws on the loose that look a lot like the gnomes from a distance. No really, they're actually killer snow bunnies. Rodney even warns you about them. The controls feel okay, except for the jumping, which doesn't seem to want to work half of the time. Sometimes you'll press it and he'll hop, and other times he'll just go headfirst into a rock. Jumping over objects only gives you like 2 points anyway, so it's best to just avoid hazards altogether and do tricks when you can. The next event is Inner Tube Thrash. Here, you're just racing against another inner tuber to reach the bottom of the mountain first, all the while avoiding random sharp objects such as razor blades and toenail clippers that are just scattered around the track. You can also pop your opponent's tube, which gains you some extra points. This event is okay, but not something that you'd really want to play more than once. Here we have Acro Aerials, and it's where things really take a dive. You're supposed to either tap A or B very quickly to build up speed, and then use A and the D-pad to perform tricks. But half the time your button presses just seem to do nothing. You can press and press, but your guy might pull off just 1 or 2 moves. I'm really not sure what I'm doing wrong here. And not to mention, the judges are picky. A 0? Really? Alright, I'm really gonna give it a go here. Come on. Whoa, I just jumped into space. Did a backflip too. And the landing, got it. Alright. Okay, judges, how about now? Okay. Alright, moving on to the next event. This one's called Downhill Blitz. At first it seemed pretty good, sorta similar to the downhill race from Skate or Die, but with better controls. That is, however, until you come up to the jumping segments. Once again, the jump button just seems to refuse to work most of the time, and I have no idea why. On top of that, even when you do manage to jump, it seems like it isn't enough to clear the gaps. Look, right here I'm hitting A over and over in different directions just to test it out, and nothing. Oh, come on. Moving on. Okay, so here we are in the final event of the game, Snowball Blast. In this event, you're defending your ice fort from a bunch of jealous kids. You use the A button and the D-pad to change direction, and the B button to throw a snowball at the little brats. Your cursor moves a little too slow to really keep up with all of the kids without getting hit, but this one is actually pretty fun. Especially when you get the automatic snowball power-up and get to take down the kids like Rambo. The only real problem with this event is that your thumb will get sore after a while from using the D-pad too quickly to aim all across the screen, but other than that, it's not too bad. You know, it's kind of funny to think that the silly spin-off would actually be better than the original game that it's based off of, but Ski or Die is actually the more polished game. I wouldn't say it's great or anything, it still has its fair share of issues, and both of the games are pretty short in gameplay value overall. Choosing to program in as many types of games as possible instead of just polishing up 1 or 2 of them. Well, like it says in the title of the video, this is a review of the Skate or Die games. which means I have one more NES game to review. But first, I'd like to briefly go over the Skate or Die Game Boy games. The first handheld title we're checking out is Skate or Die Bad and Rad. Wow, now that's a sick title, man. The designers must have thought so anyway, because you're forced to look at it for quite a while. In fact, that timer on the side of the screen is keeping track of how long you have to wait until you can actually start the game. Nope. Not yet. And there. Yeah, you have to wait 25 seconds until you can get past the title screen. I don't know any other game that does that. When you actually get into the game, you'll find that it's a 2D platformer. Armed only with a duck and a jump ability, you need to navigate the level while avoiding enemies such as tires, dogs, and rival skateboarders that throw knives at you. This really caught me off guard as it was so different from the previous games I played. But at the same time, it made me a little excited since side-scrolling platformers are one of my favorite genre of video games. My excitement was short-lived, however, as this platformer in particular controls very strangely. You can eventually get used to the stiff jumping, but the thing that really kills the gameplay for me is how long it takes your character to turn around, especially when dealing with bosses. Oh yes, there are bosses in this game. Like for instance in this circus level. I actually thought that this clown boss was pretty cool at first. He throws juggling balls at you and then you have to knock them back at him to deal damage. I managed to get his health down to a decent chunk on my first attempt, but for whatever reason, on every single subsequent try, I just could not knock the ball back. I tried to position myself in a better spot, but this is difficult to do when it takes so long to change direction. To my frustration, it seems that yet again a cool concept was overcome by bad controls and programming. Oh, there are also some levels that take place from an above view perspective, but they're even less fun than the normal 2D scrolling levels, and because you're going constantly downhill, you can get stuck taking damage in certain hazards if you run into the wrong spot. Yeah, overall, this game isn't a good time. Next up we have Skate or Die Tour de Trash. Who comes up with these names? You don't have to wait 14 seconds at the title screen, so that's a good start. The main mode of this game is something called Stale Fish Tour. And they're just nailing it with these names. Here, the game takes another wild departure from the others, this time having you racing in different tubes around the world. Your goal is to simply avoid obstacles and reach the end before the timer runs out. It's not perfect, but you know what? The controls actually do what they're supposed to, most of the time. The later levels actually start to get pretty challenging, and sometimes it seems like obstacles can appear before you have time to react, but overall, it's not too difficult. When you beat the levels, you get to travel, going from Los Angeles to Las Vegas to Chernobyl. That escalated quickly. The other mode is called Retro Rocket Ramp, which is basically just a better version of the freestyle event from the first Skate or Die. Yeah, it's still weird that you have to mash A to increase your speed, but overall the controls feel more responsive here. Who would have thought that there'd actually be a Skate or Die game that worked properly? Well, are you traumatized yet? Hope not, because we still have one more game to go. Here we got the grand finale, Skate or Die 2. Are you ready for the best NES menu song of all time? I'm not joking. Prepare yourself. Just listen to that. That's friggin' awesome. Alright, enough of that. Got a game to review. So, Skate or Die 2 actually starts off with a story. You're introduced to some characters including good old Rodney, the antagonizing Ice Pick, and Ariel from The Little Mermaid. Wow, can't say I expected that. Well anyway, the story begins as the mayor's wife is out walking her dog and your skateboarding protagonist, distracted by a taunting Ice Pick, accidentally runs the poor thing over. As the mayor's wife deals with this tragedy, she comes to the next logical conclusion, by making the mayor ban all skateboards. A little drastic. The first level sets you out on the streets of your city. There isn't too much to do here besides skate the streets, go into the sewers, and skate into empty warehouses. Enemies and obstacles, however, are all over the place. You have rival skateboarders, rats, dogs that only attack you specifically, and, boxing lizards. The environment itself is also an obstacle. Just skating into walls or jumping off of a high enough distance can cause you damage. And luckily you have 16 blocks of health because this tends to happen quite a bit. You do have friends, however, Lester and Rodney, who will give you things in exchange for random items that you pick up, including CDs and chili fries. That is, if you're able to catch up with them, as they won't stop and wait around for you to buy stuff from them. Lester will teach you some new tricks, which I honestly didn't bother with too much, and Rodney will offer you some new boards. This is very important, as the skateboard you start off with is awful. You can hardly jump and it feels like you're constantly riding through mud. One cool thing about this game though is it actually makes use of all the buttons. The D-pad to move, A to ollie, and the B button can actually have 3 different moves attached to it depending on which direction you press while using it. Your main attack is using your paintballs. One thing I must point out early on is that the controls in this game are unfortunately pretty clunky. You need to stop and turn before changing direction. And the fact that you need to be moving forward in order to move vertically can make things challenging as well. I know that it makes sense since you're on a skateboard, but it translates very oddly to a game like this. Luckily, your 180 kick turn can help you turn around more quickly. But the fact that something as simple as turning around had to be programmed into a special trick is a little sad. So anyway, the game doesn't really tell you specifically, but you need to find the mayor's wife. I guess maybe you want to talk to her about getting the skateboards unbanned, which honestly doesn't really seem to be that effective considering that the streets are littered with people skateboarding around. What you want to do is search around the level for tradable items in order to upgrade your skateboard with Rodney. And then you simply find the mayor's wife, who happens to be inside of an abandoned warehouse for whatever reason. And just in case you're wondering, yes, this is a boss fight. What you need to do is get down to the platform that she's on and then hit her with your paintball gun. But unfortunately, this is easier said than done. If you skate too close to the wall, then you'll bump into it and reset back above her. If you drop in too close to her, she'll beat you with her purse and then you'll reset again. Oh, and by the way, if you lose all of your health, then you have to start the level all over again. The trick is to drop down carefully in between the old woman and the wall, and find a sweet spot so she can't hit you with her projectiles. After that, you just unload on her.
Did I just murder an old lady?
After your casual murder, you're treated to another cutscene where a man tells you that your local half-pipe project is going to get torn down since it isn't licensed or something like that. I like how they just move a picture of a bulldozer, box and all, across the screen. And just look at how sad your character is. He looks absolutely miserable. Geez kid, you sure are being emotional for someone that just murdered an old woman. So anyway, you need to get yourself a building permit, which costs money, which leads you to level 2, where you'll be delivering to stores in the mall to get money needed. This level is basically a fetch quest. You take a package to one store, then get orders to take something to another. You continue this until you've delivered 12 items in total. Seems simple enough, but this mall has 2 levels of stores and plenty of obstacles in the way. On top of that, you have to do this all on a time limit, and just like the first level, with only 1 life. Obstacles include rival skateboarders, shoppers that seem to purposely crash into you, mall cops that will take you away from your next destination, and of course the mall itself. Run into anything, and that's a block of health gone. The trick here is to basically be careful yet brisk about your deliveries. This can be hard the first time since you have no idea where any of the stores are located, so I suggest taking a tour around the mall first and memorizing or possibly even writing down where everything is. One good tip is that all of the food places seem to be on the 2nd floor. There isn't too much else to say here. If you're cautious enough, you should be able to make it eventually. Next, you're treated to a cutscene where Rodney reveals the new plans for the half-pipe, but soon after, a simple mistake causes the plans to blow out into the beach. This is where level 3 takes place. The goal here is very simple. You just have to collect the 16 pages of plans that have been blown across the beach. Your enemies this time include angry crabs, seagulls, muscle men, and women on skates. Once again, this is a situation where you need to be careful yet speedy, as the wind is constantly blowing the pages around, and if you let even one of the pages get blown off of the beach, then it's game over. Most of the pages aren't too difficult to grab, but some of them like to blow into weird areas that are either difficult to grab without taking damage or unreachable altogether. What you want to do is just keep going so you can grab as many as you can, and then return back to the ones that were out of bounds before. Okay, just one more page left. But look, they put it right behind a muscle man. And there's a crab, but I only have 1 block of health left. Whoa, that was close. Got it. With the plans retrieved, now it's just up to Ariel to deliver the permit. Unfortunately, on the way back, she gets intercepted and kidnapped by Ice Pick. Major bummer, dude. He takes her to a big empty building, where the final level takes place. Okay, I want you to think of some of the hardest final levels in video game history. Imagine them all collected in a book somewhere. Okay, this horrible pain in the ass of a level would definitely be included. Basically, the challenge here is to navigate this giant maze and reach the roof, not only with tons of rooms and enemies, but with 4 different floors of them on the building. The fact that you're tasked to make it through all of this on a single life is just ridiculous. I almost gave up and ended the review right here, but I decided that I had to finish the game. I came this far after all, and I didn't want any regrets. Sub-Zero. I really can't give you any advice here, as the enemies just seem to sometimes be easy to avoid and other times will take multiple hits off of you all at once. There's health in certain rooms of the building, but they're always away from the elevators that you're trying to reach in order to proceed, which will often just have you wandering around even more enemies and taking more damage. Why the hell does this kid bully have so many people working for him? It's ridiculous. Is he a punk or a mob boss? This level is so damn hard and unreasonable that somebody actually made a map for it. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm using that damn map. Hell, even with a map, even with knowing where every single health is located and where all of the elevators are, this is still a big challenge. But I'm gonna finish this game, no matter what. Alright, I'm at the final elevator. 16 out of 18 health points. Let's do this. Here's the final boss, Ice Pick. He doesn't seem that complicated, he just likes to move up and down the screen and then charge at you when you're in front of him, which means you just need to avoid these attacks and then hit him with your paintballs. But if you recall my explanation of the controls earlier, this is easier said than done. The only way to dodge his attacks by moving vertically is by moving forward, often towards him, at the same time. And every time you need to turn around, it takes even more time. This is gonna be tough. Alright, I'm getting some hits in. But so is he. It's just so awkward to move around. Come on. Come on. Oh no. One more hit and I'm dead. I gotta be careful. Whoa. Whoa. Oh god, that was close. Come on, die already. Come on. Come on. Yes, eat it, you jerk. He even cries for his mama. What a baby. So finally the permit is saved, the half pipe is constructed, and you and your friends look over your work as fireworks go off during the credits. Wow. Oh, but you didn't think that was it, did you? Of course, you actually get a skate on the half pipe. Oh sure, you can just select the half pipe from the beginning menu instead of having to go through all this crap that I did, but forget about that. I earned this. And honestly, as many versions as I've played of this already, this might be the best one of them all. Yeah, it just seems like after so many games they were actually able to create a half-pipe segment that controls pretty decently. Skate or die? Maybe you're okay after all. Should I really be surprised? I think I pretty much said everything that I have to say about these games. There's only one thing left to do. That was a close one. It's time to venture into the past again. I know it may seem like I've always been into the NES since it's featured so much on my channel, and I do love collecting and playing them, but growing up, my first real system was the Super Nintendo. So today, we're looking at another SNES game from my childhood. Here we have Pitfall, the Mayan adventure. The original Pitfall is one of the most recognizable video games of all time. Released for the Atari 2600 in 1982, the game's simple premise and colorful graphics had players from all over jumping over pits and searching for treasure. Many people consider this to be the very first platforming game. Designed by David Crane, the same creator as A Boy and His Blob, and yes, the only voice actor in Space Shuttle Project, the game was a hit. The main character, Pitfall Harry, easily ranks up there with the most classic video game characters, such as Mario and Sonic. However, unlike Mario and Sonic, Pitfall Harry would eventually fade into obscurity. So I've decided to give this series its dues, and review one of its lesser known sequels, Pitfall, the Mayan Adventure. The game begins in the Mayan jungle, with Pitfall Harry's son, Pitfall Harry Jr., entering an ancient temple where he finds a treasure. which is a golden statue replica of himself. That's kind of weird. Like, imagine if Indiana Jones was looking for some treasure and it ended up being a statue of himself. Anyway, Junior tries to show off his disturbing discovery when his dad gets kidnapped by someone. Or dad-napped, I guess. From there you can start the game. The setting is dark but detailed. Enemies and obstacles you have to deal with include snakes, monkeys, warthogs, and of course the classic pits. Wow, was that a reference to the Terminator? You have a wide range of attacks to get yourself through, your main melee attack being this belt-like thing that you can smack enemies around with. Other weapons you find include rocks that you can chuck at enemies, boomerangs, and mini nuclear bombs. Whatever works, I guess. You also collect hearts for health, but instead of those cartoony Valentine's hearts, they're actual live beating hearts. Yeah, I guess it takes a lot to survive in the jungle. The one issue I've noticed right away is that all of the actions seem to have a split-second delay to them. It's not bad enough to ruin the controls, but it's something that you'll need to get used to for some of the harder segments later on. Something I really have to praise this game on is the animation. Every single thing that Junior does is incredibly detailed. Whoa, seriously, they put a lot of work into this game. Ow. Yeah, there's even an animation for running into walls, which is neat, but it can be annoying later on, so try to avoid that. Another interesting thing is how your damage is displayed. Instead of your traditional health bar, it shows a crocodile getting closer to eating you every time you get hit. It's kinda cool, but it does make it a bit harder to measure how close you are to losing a life. It can be a little confusing at first, swinging around on vines, running through different layers of the level, and bungee jumping on plants that make sound effects that remind me of Yoshi's Island. But these little statue checkpoints point you in the general direction you want to go. At the end of the level, you come up against a jaguar, and honestly it's pretty tough for the first boss. It takes about 1,000,000 hits to kill, and it's really hard to avoid damage the first time you fight it. What you should do is be patient and try to get the timing down between jumping and attacking with your rocks, which you should have plenty of by this point. This will be difficult at first, especially with the delayed controls, but you should be able to power your way through this fight eventually. The second level takes place in front of a rushing waterfall, which can be a little harsh on the eyes after the dark jungle from the first area. Besides that, you have much of the same enemies from before. You're also introduced to these giant mosquitoes, which are about as annoying as actual mosquitoes. The main challenge here is figuring out where you're supposed to go. Unlike the first level, this one focuses a lot on vertical platforming, with more bungee jumping and rocky platforms that disintegrate over time. Because the level looks so similar wherever you go, it can be easy to get stuck in a loop, and it doesn't help that progressing involves entering these secret caves that don't really stand out at all. Be as thorough as you can, and you should be able to find the exit eventually. You'll know you're close because you'll see these red birds flying around that try to stop you. See ya. The next level takes place inside of a mine, so thankfully our eyes are given a rest again with this cooling dark background. Here you're faced with bats, which are basically like upgraded versions of the mosquitoes, along with rats and spiders who pack a painful bite despite their small sizes. Oh, there's also a nice barrage of minecarts that you'll have to avoid. Did you think you're actually gonna ride in a minecart in this level? Nope. Well, you do get a ride on these wheeled platforms at least. This stage is much like the others where you're simply trying to make your way to the exit. But this time there's a little more added to your exploring, including crawling under blocked areas and pulling levers to progress. There's also a cool bonus stage located in this level, where you play a memory game in order to gain some treasure, or even an extra life if you do well enough. After wandering around enough, you'll come across that minecart stampede. Just avoid ending up like Mufasa, jump into the entrance above, and you're done with the level. Though I'm not really sure why, since it doesn't appear to lead outside of the mine. Either way, next up is the lost city of Copan. That's right, you're up to some serious stuff now. I wonder what kind of crazy enemies we'll run into here. Oh, maybe they started running a bit low on their budget or something? Actually, this out-of-place low-bit enemy is here to tell you that there's a bonus level nearby. Hop into the interdimensional portal and you're taken to the original Pitfall from 1982. Wow, what a treat. It may not seem like a big deal today, but having an older game within a sequel of the same series was really something special to see back when this game first came out. For a bonus fun fact, the sound you hear when swinging across a vine is supposed to be the Tarzan yell. So that's where these pixelated scorpions were coming from. Someone should probably board that portal up. So anyway, back to the Lost City. Here we're introduced to even more enemies and obstacles, including living skeletons, axe-wielding statues, and tar pits. The platforming stakes have been raised as well, with stones that will flip back and forth, and statue tongues that are unexpectedly bouncy. It's pretty much the same as before. If you're used to the controls by now, the jumping segments shouldn't take too long to get through. And these red chili peppers even increase your speed and jump height. Oh, there's also a boss at the end. Remember how you had to fight that one jaguar on the first level? Well, now you have to deal with two of them at the same time. It's easier than it sounds. They just take a lot of hits. There's plenty of space, so just evade and attack accordingly and you should be able to take care of them just fine. After that, you're up to the Kopan Temple. Now there's more hazards than ever before. You have these live 2D paintings that will try to hit you with their spears, giant stone donuts, walls that shoot hot bursts of fire, spirits that will throw fire at you, and giant swinging balls of fire that sway back and forth. So yeah, they should just call this the Fire Temple. These many new dangers plus pretty much everything from the previous levels makes this a really easy place to lose some lives. But after enough time you should be able to get past it. And hey, you even get to show off your superiority to Indiana Jones by using 2 whips to get across gaps. After that you arrive at the Rainforest, which looks sorta like a blue version of the jungle from the first level. It also has a lot more of these plants that shoot missiles at you. Wow, Mother Nature's getting out of hand here. There isn't too much else to say here. Being a later level, it's somewhat challenging but fairly short. After that, you're at a lagoon, which just looks like the bottom of the waterfall level. I like that they added this though because there's some platforming segments where you jump on crocodiles, which is a cool callback to the original Pitfall. That being said, the jumping here can be a bit tricky since the way some platforms are lined up diagonally, you're not just estimating your jumps on a 2D plane, but sort of like a 3D perspective as well. Next up is a really interesting level. You return back to the minecart area, but instead of a normal jumping segment, you're riding a wheeled platform and jumping between different tracks in order to avoid obstacles. I find this part really fun. It's sort of similar to the Donkey Kong Country levels. Oh, not to mention there's freaking demon heads flying at you from behind. The next level is some ruins, which looks suspiciously like the Lost City, except at night. It's pretty much the same stuff as before. See, you even fight a jaguar boss at the end like the Whoa, okay, not a jaguar. It's a jaguar man thing. Yeah, if you thought that the bosses from before took a lot of hits, then you're in trouble. Besides a high health bar, the main difficulty here is just avoiding his attacks in general. It's much harder to do than with the normal jaguars. While he's in his humanoid form, simply trying to jump over him just won't do it. But I wasn't going to go down that easily. My best advice here would be to save up your little atomic bombs for when he's in his humanoid mode, since it stuns him, and then use your rocks for the rest of the fight. If you don't give up and keep trying, he should eventually go down. Seemed like some final boss stuff, didn't it? Well, it wasn't, because we still have one more level to get through. This is basically just a lever pulling marathon while avoiding many of the obstacles and enemies introduced throughout the game. The only notable addition being these spiked balls. There isn't anything particularly hard about this level, it's mainly just finding your way to the exit. After you've done that, you're finally finished. With the final level, that is. There's still a final boss, the Warrior Spirit. Yeah, that's right, this giant knockoff of the thing is the final boss of the game. And as intimidating as he is, he's actually quite easy to defeat, using a trick I figured out during my very first attempt to fight him. All you have to do is hug the walls as he's reforming, and then get some hits on him before he jumps away. He won't be able to hit you, and that's literally all there is to it. Repeat a bunch of times, and you've beaten the final boss of Pitfall, the Mayan adventure. But what about Junior's dad, Pitfall Harry? Wow. Yep, that's him. That's gotta be one of the best endings to a video game I've ever seen. So, Pitfall the Mayan Adventure. Was it a great Super Nintendo game? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The animation is superb, but the controls are a bit off. There's several cool looking levels with new enemies in each one, but then they start to repeat backgrounds with minor color changes. I'm glad that there's a final boss, and bosses in general, but the bosses are somewhat repetitive and the final one is a bit of a pushover. That being said, the game was pretty fun, and it did a decent job of switching things up now and then. With a bit more polish and a little less repetition, it could have been a really great SNES title. Overall, I think it's fair to call it a good game. You know, as fun as it is to find old obscure gems that I've never played before, it's also fun once in a while to just go back and revisit some games from my childhood to see how they hold up today. The only thing I really regret is that I haven't really had a chance to review any modern games. Most of the modern games that come to mind wouldn't really inspire a review from me personally, though I have heard of these things called indie games that are supposed to be pretty interesting. But are they any good? So, since this new Power Rangers movie just came out, I figured I'd take the opportunity to review one of the games. Unfortunately, I don't have too much to choose from since the only Power Rangers game I happen to own is this N64 game. Where did this even come from? I don't remember owning this. Yeah, well, it's better than nothing. Let's get started. Most people that grew up in the 90s were at least aware of the phenomenon that was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I can't say that I was a huge fan in my own right, but I did know them, and my biggest personal memory of the series was probably the Power Rangers movie I had on VHS featuring the infamous Ivan Ooze. So anyway, let's see if Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue is any good. There's two main modes to the game, Titanium Quest, which I assume is the main story mode, and Megazord Arena, which is a versus style mode between giant robots and monsters, some of which are unlocked as you play through the game. The Titanium Quest menu is a little weird. You have episodes 1 through 3 listed and then simply story underneath. I assumed that these were the chapters of the story at first, especially when I selected episode 1 and then saw the different level names, so I selected story assuming that's how you'd start the game. But all the story actually does is show you the first cutscene from episode 1 before throwing you back to the menu. Basically, there's no reason for it to be an option. So episode 1 starts with the Rangers and their underwater base.
Underwater base?
Oh yeah, I probably should have mentioned that being released in 2000, this particular game features a version of the Rangers that I don't know anything about.
Oh, cool. Underwater base, cool.
So anyway, the Rangers are in their underwater base when they get a message from...
Okay, hang on a second. I can accept the fact that these are new Rangers and there's going to be new locations and characters, but who the heck is this?
Okay, so if they're underwater and there's trouble, then they're gonna need to get a warning somehow, but I honestly didn't expect what looks to be some average mustached cop to be their messenger. No Zordon or some other ancient wise sage from space, just a regular cop in their secret headquarters. So, long story short, instead of facing the problem right away, the Rangers have to go through some virtual reality training to prepare for the real fight. So, sorta like the Danger Room from the X-Men? I guess that makes sense. Your first training challenge is with the Yellow Ranger, and... what? I think the Yellow Ranger has a wedgie. Look at the way she's running around all stiffly. Or maybe she had to use the bathroom before training and she didn't tell anyone. But yeah, the controls are simple. The joystick to run around, the A button to shoot forwards, and the B button to shoot backwards. All you have to do is simply wipe out all the enemies in the level and you're finished. Well, by enemies, I mean these green goopy puddles that just sit there. Wow. Now this is some hardcore training. Technically you can get hurt by these things by stepping in them, but there's no real reason for you to do that anyway, unless you just want someone to walk in on you and hear this sound out of context.
Hey Billy, did you finish your homework? Come back later.
After you wipe out the threatening Jello, you're off to the next virtual training mission, which this time has you driving a fire truck. You know, back in my day the Power Rangers had giant mechanical T-Rexes and saber-toothed tigers, but plain old fire truck is cool too, I guess. So, as you may have guessed, your job here is to put out fires. But not just any fires. Cars that are randomly just on fire in the middle of a busy street. Yeah, I don't really see this situation happening in real life. Also, all of the cars that are on fire have the same voice shouting for help. I get that this is a simulation, but can't you at least program in a few different voices? Anyway, your mission is to put out all the flaming vehicles. Occasionally you'll start speeding up uncontrollably and we'll have to avoid some random enemy that just hates firemen, I guess. But it's not very difficult. Oh, don't forget to avoid crashing into other cars. Well, never mind. You don't really crash into cars, you just send them flying when you bump into them. I mean, seriously, these things will rebound off the building and spin away into the distance. They don't take up much health either, so hey, screw these guys. Out of the way, jerks, I've got fires to put out. Yeah, I'm sure the nearby citizens will be just fine. Oh, and I just love the cheers you get at the end for completing a mission. Yay! They just sound so enthusiastic. Next up, you actually get a battle with the Megazord. Oh man, this transformation sequence is getting me so pumped up. That's some good animation right there. The Zord battle is probably the clunkiest part of the game. You run around awkwardly trying to grab power-ups before your enemy, and using A to shoot missiles at him for damage. In a first-person perspective, well, unless you go in close for some melee damage, then the camera suddenly shifts to third person and you punch instead of shooting missiles. The B button is for blocking, I think. It's sort of hard to tell from the first person point of view because when you press it, you just freeze in place while the screen glows. The most annoying part of this level is that both you and the enemy have health that regenerates fairly quickly over time, so it takes forever for you to actually get in a winning or even losing position. The melee seems to do the most damage, but they never stand still long enough for you to finish them off. All I can think to do is just ignore all the power-ups that are dropped all around you and just focus on damaging the enemy as quickly as possible. Don't let him get away. Eventually, he should go down. So right after your training is over, the first big baddie of the game is introduced, a giant tornado monster named Typhonus. He immediately causes havoc on the city, knocking over trees and sending mini tornadoes all over. But hang on, didn't that cop guy that was talking to us earlier say that we were facing a challenge soon? So that means he knew about this all along, and instead of telling us, had us do that unnecessary training instead. What the hell, man? Imagine if a hurricane was about to hit a city and cause major damage, but the one guy who knows about it doesn't tell anybody until after it's already happened. What a jerk. So the next mission is basically the same as the first one with the green goop, except with clearing falling logs. There's also some actual enemies this time, which have an even more ridiculous running animation than the Rangers. They don't really fight you either, they just run into you and explode. Wow, was this game the inspiration for the Heaven Smiles in Killer 7? I shouldn't be comparing this game to that. Besides, you actually do run into some enemies that throw projectiles later. Except these ones seem to have broken legs or something. I mean, look at the way they just limp around. I sort of feel bad for them. Maybe they're just mad because one of the fallen trees broke their legs and they wondered where the hell the Power Rangers were while tornadoes were ravaging the city. So they're just getting revenge. Oh, where were the Rangers? You know, they were just training in a simulation with green goo and fire trucks instead of dealing with the actual situation happening right now. There isn't really too much else to say about this game. As you play through, it just seems to cycle through the same few styles of levels before finishing off with the Megazord battle at the end. It doesn't even really increase the difficulty significantly, and would probably take more effort to fail than to win. They do introduce a new level type where you zoom around in a flying vehicle, but it's about as boring as the rest. This is a game for little kids with no expectations that just want to play as their favorite TV heroes. Can I appreciate that? Yes, I can. Does that excuse it for being a bad game? Not at all. Everything just feels so choppy and unpolished. I feel like even if I was a fan of this particular series as a kid, I would feel pretty let down with what this game has to offer. It isn't fun, nor is it challenging, so it lacks two of the attributes that often attract me to unfamiliar games. It also just isn't designed well in general. I mean, look at this part where we have to go around town rescuing citizens. You find a guy between these two buildings, so you'd assume that if you kept following this path it might lead you to the next guy, or at least another area, right? Wrong. Nope, you're just greeted with a nice brick wall. Yeah, they totally took the time to program a brick wall just so you had to walk back through that long path again, making it take even longer to rescue the next guy and finish the level. What's wrong with these people? So what happens when you're playing a game designed by sadists? You stop playing.
Well, that was a bad one. That's no easier way to say it. That was bad. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. It was just a game crapped out for kids who like Power Rangers. And to be honest, most kids probably wouldn't have complained. I mean, it was playable most of the time. You know, between this and Sub-Zero Mythologies, I really gotta find a good N64 game to review. Hey guys, welcome to J Reviews. I'm in a really good mood today. Wanna know why? Because today we're looking at another Super Nintendo game, and one that used to be one of my favorites to play as a kid. Now I have to admit, it's been a long time since I've tried this one out, but I remember it being really good. So enough introduction, let's try it out again. This time with an adult perspective. This is Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Busts Loose.
I'm sure that most of you are aware of Looney Tunes, the classic cartoon shorts starring iconic characters such as Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. While at first glance Tiny Toon Adventures may look like the stereotypical baby versions of the original Looney Tunes, it actually contains a unique and humorous premise. with these younger Toon proteges going to Acme University to learn how to become funny cartoon characters. So, how did this translate to the Super Nintendo? The game starts with a brief introduction to the main characters, Babs and Buster Bunny. No relation. You play as Buster, and the first level takes place in Acme University. The first level eases you into the gameplay, which mainly consists of 3 moves. First, there's the jump, which is about what you'd expect, a standard for platforming games. Next is the drop kick, an attack which has Buster foot diving towards enemies. This is extremely useful since precise timing can take out any enemies in your path, and your rebound after striking can deal damage as well. Finally, there's his dash, which is probably the most important move and one of the most defining features of the game. The dash is used not only as a speed boost, but also to reach higher areas, slide underneath barriers, and most importantly of all, to run up along the sides of walls. Cool stuff, right? Just be wary of the dash meter that can deplete over time. Run out of energy in the wrong spot and you're toast. You can recover dash energy along with your health by picking up these little statues. The most important items, however, are probably these crystal carrots since they increase your maximum health by 1 for the remainder of the level. After some basic platforming warm-ups, you drop down into this dark room where you face off against the first mini-boss of the game, Arnold. All he really does is charge at you, so all you have to do is hit him with some drop kicks whenever you're able to. You don't even have to wait until he's done attacking either, since your attack will override his. After, there's just a few more enemies before you run into Hamilton, who warns you that Dizzy is terrorizing the cafeteria and needs your help to stop him. This serves as the opening level's boss battle. It takes place in the kitchen with conveyor belts producing food constantly. Once in a while, Dizzy will spaz out all over the place in a tornado, which you'll have to avoid. Simply attacking Dizzy like other enemies won't work either, as it just causes him to spaz out again. The goal here is to feed Dizzy so he calms down. You have to hit the platform above you just right so that the food flies right into his face, cause apparently he doesn't know how to pick up food. Knocking enough food into his greedy gullet, he'll slip into a food coma, finishing off the level. After this, you'll spin the wheel to determine a bonus game, which you'll play one of between every main level of the game. These are used not only as a fun break between stages, but also as a way to gain extra lives. Levels include Hungry Boy Hamilton, where you switch tiles around to lead the cartoon pig to apples, Mystery Weight Challenge, where you select the order of your characters and weigh them against your opponents, heaviest character each round earning an extra life, Furball's Championship Squash, where you try hitting a ball with a tennis racket 15 times in a row, Find Your Friends, where you play as Babs navigating a maze to free her friends while avoiding getting caught herself. And finally, Plucky Duck's Go-Go Bingo. It's essentially bingo. The next level is an Old West type stage featuring the antagonistic Montana Max. It contains your basic enemies, which mostly consists of what seems to be members of the Wile E. Coyote family, and vultures. But the real highlight of this stage is the train segments. Here, the game bumps things up a notch, which forces you to get really good with the dashing mechanic. First with these Rocky Mountain pads where you have to keep up with the screen or lose a life trying. You can't even slow down for a moment or you're gone. After that, the track begins to fall apart and you have to use your timing and the dash ability just right to make it to the next carts without falling to your death. There's a couple goons on the train which are really satisfying to hit for some reason. And wait a second, Jay, am I a descendant of a train robber? Nah. Soon after, you come up against a cool platforming segment where you have to jump across these wooden blocks that are flying by in the air. It's not too difficult, but wow, this must have been quite stimulating as a kid. I probably owe a lot to this game for honing some of my basic video game skills. I also like how they allow you to hit Arnold even though he seems like one of those invincible background characters. Nice touch. At the end of the level, you go through a small trial to get to the front of the train. I guess you could call it the boss battle. Destroy the parts that are in your path, be patient, and you should be able to make it just fine. Once you catch up to Max, he tells you that the train is out of control. You both hop into a railroad cart and button mash your way out of there. That's a really specific speed. Moving on, we have the obligatory horror level. Enemies here include goofy ghosts, two-headed Frankenstein monsters, and Dracula himself. The sound and visuals in this level are quite nice, and the weighted ball mechanics that you use to progress through the level is pretty neat. Oddly enough, the level itself is very short though. I think I completed it more quickly than the first one. At the end of it, you run into Babs, who says that her friend has been kidnapped by some mad scientists. In case you're wondering, yeah, that's her friend. The boss battle here is actually kinda neat. The mind-controlled friend will throw debris at you occasionally. Your goal here is to avoid the light bulbs and drop-kick the rocks, which will rebound them into the mind-controlling machine. Sure, it's pretty easy, but a fun idea. The next level really changes things up as you're put into the middle of a football game. And this isn't just a bonus stage, it's a main level. Yeah, I really didn't expect a sports level in a platforming game. Your goal here is to simply score a touchdown by reaching the other side of the field, and surprisingly it actually follows the rules pretty closely. There's first downs, you can do a run or a pass play, there's incomplete passes. I'm not a sports guy, but that's pretty impressive. It's pretty challenging too, having to jump and duck past the opposing team as you try to make progress. It took me a number of tries to actually make the touchdown. Next up we have a sky level. Maybe they were running out of ideas at this point, but I'm not complaining. This one is mostly vertical platforming, jumping on bubbles and hot air balloons and eventually making it to a pinball section. What is this, Sonic the Hedgehog? Once you've progressed enough, you discover the script to the next level. Pretty meta, I know. After this, it's a race to the top as the entire level begins to fall apart. Once again, testing your mastery of the dash. After this, you're onto the final level of the game, which happens to be a space opera. In this stage, you're searching for a key to get inside of an airship while avoiding duck-shaped stormtroopers and robots. Since you always start off new levels with only 3 hearts, and the enemies are a bit harder now, it's actually pretty tough. This makes finding extra hearts more valuable now than ever. After you've entered the space vessel, you walk across a laser bridge before ending up in the middle of a war zone. Your only defense is to hide behind the occasional wall, but since you don't know where they are the first couple times playing, this can be easier said than done. Once you make it through all of that alive, you're given the choice between an easy course and a hard course, which both has you running up walls and hitting buttons, some which regenerate your dash, and others that, well, just look. Jeez man, that's brutal. I'm not really sure the difference between which course you take besides the difficulty, but I'm going with hard just in case. It's actually pretty damn challenging too. After that, there's just one more section before the final boss. The enemies and obstacles here are placed in such ways that it really does feel like the end of the game, so that's good. Alright, the final boss of the game. Darth Duck and his paralyzer gun. All you have to do is knock him from his docking position and then use his own weapon against him, while avoiding the same laser threatening to fry you. Man, why do I always gotta end up fighting final bosses with barely any health left? Luckily, the trick to beating him is fairly simple. Just avoid the path of the laser by jumping towards the middle of the gun whenever you can. If you're careful enough, you should be able to beat him no problem. And that, my friends, is Tiny Toon Adventures Buster Bust Loose. After all these years, do I still think that this is a good game? Yeah, definitely. While many of the bosses are a bit too easy and the game itself does become a bit scarce in level length over time, overall, it's still a really fun experience. There's plenty of bonuses and secrets, the sound and graphics are great, and there's actually some really fun and challenging platforming segments. This game really stood the test of time and nostalgia.
Well, I'm pretty satisfied to know that Tiny Toon Adventures is about as good as I remember it being. I definitely recommend it to anyone looking to add a good game to their collection. Well, that was a fun review. You know, I've done crappy games, great games, games from my childhood, and games I've never even heard of before. I wonder what's going to be next.
I know what you're thinking. Did he pick a good game, or did he pick a bad game? To tell you the truth, with all this excitement, I kinda lost track myself. But being that this is the Nintendo Entertainment System, the most groundbreaking video game console of all time, you gotta ask yourself one question. Am I feeling lucky? Well, do ya?
Oh yeah, it's real.
Dirty Harry was a film series starring the great Clint Eastwood. They featured a ruthless cop named Harry Callahan who had no patience for criminals and preferred using lethal force whenever possible, all the while saying badass lines that are still quotable to this day. I'm not really sure which movie the game is supposed to be based on. The newest movie at the time would have been the fifth and final, which came out 2 years before the game. But the picture on the cartridge comes from the fourth movie. I'm probably looking a little too far into it. So let's get right into it and see if this game is any good.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Well, right away we're greeted with the very accurate depiction of Harry, and one of his most famous lines. It might sound like crap to you, but I honestly always liked when the NES did stuff like this. It's cool to see what the limited hardware is capable of. So when you press start, the game takes you to a password screen, which spoils right away that there's only 3 levels in the game. Maybe they're long levels. Press start again and... whoa, what the heck? Yeah, the game spawns you right in the middle of these 2 punks and a third one on a roof tossing dynamite at you. You don't even get a chance to figure out what the buttons do, so I'll tell you. The B button punches, which makes it feel a bit like a beat-em-up game at first, but come on, this is Dirty Harry, not Double Dragon. What you want to use is the A button. Pressing it once brandishes your revolver, and pressing it again fires a shot. Yeah, now this feels like I'm playing Dirty Harry. You can aim upwards by tapping the D-pad up, but you can't point downwards for some reason. It just causes Harry to duck. But I guess this isn't too much of an issue since most of the enemies are either above you or in front of you. The aiming in general is also a little annoying since tapping up in front of an open alleyway leads you up to another area. But sometimes you're tapping up with your revolver to aim at enemies and then you'll just end up walking to an alleyway by accident. You do have limited ammo, but you usually find more bullets before you run out. And speaking of ammo, let's look at the items. If you press start, you'll see your item menu. The top row are active items, which you select in the menu and then press A to use outside of it, like your revolver. And the bottom are passive items, which are used automatically in the right situation. Items include bombs, hot dogs to increase your health, lockpicks for opening doors, and, I don't know what that is. Kinda looks like a crack pipe. So anyway, back to the controls. Your only other move is your jump, which is performed by pressing A and B at the same time. Usually when games use this to jump, it doesn't turn out so well, but considering that this isn't a platformer, it actually works okay. And I actually really appreciate that it lets you jump into ladders. Any game that does that gets a bonus point from me. So your goal here is to... I'm not actually sure yet. There wasn't really an introduction or a mission objective, so I'm not sure if I'm chasing after a perp or just on patrol or what. Well, let's just walk around and see if... Whoa! Oh yeah, look out for manholes. Harry's eyes are getting pretty bad in his old age and he'll fall right into them. There doesn't really seem to be anything to do down there since it's pitch black, so I guess you're not supposed to be there yet. The only other places to go are the back alleys and these doors, and since the back alleys don't really seem to lead anywhere, then I guess we'll try the doors. So this just basically leads to small rooms with nothing in them. Oh, except a snake. Remember when Dirty Harry fought a snake that one time? This is where aiming down would be really helpful, but unfortunately Harry's just incapable of doing that. As it so happens, there is a way to damage the snake. You actually have to jump on him. It doesn't really look like it's working half the time, and I'm not really sure about the strategy behind it, but yeah, you just jump on it. Once you clear the room, you figure that you'd be able to find something, right? Well, you are right. You just have to know that the boxes and cabinets that are clearly in the background are actually breakable. Not just by regular punches either. You have to press up and B. This makes Harry do a kick, which is the only way he can open things to get more items. But why the game assumes you'd know that is beyond me. Also, I'm not really sure if this is random or not, but instead of getting items, sometimes the thing you're kicking just explodes, dealing damage. Since there's no way to tell a booby-trapped object from a normal one, or at least to my knowledge, it means that you're going to have to take damage eventually when you're searching for items to progress. Oh, and I can't forget to mention the boxes on the floor. Wanna guess how you open them? No. Yep. I mean, that's how you'd open up a box, right? At this point, you've probably collected a fair amount of dynamite, and you're curious what it's used for. Well, it's not a weapon. What you do is you place it in front of these saves so you can get inside of them and get even more items. Oh look, we found one of those crack pipes. Wow, now there's laser beams? Harry's having quite the day. After a while, you'll come across this man in a white suit leaning against a wall and flipping a coin up and down. He kinda looks like he's about ready to start singing Smooth Criminal. Interestingly, this is the only guy in the game who doesn't try to kill you on sight. And if you jump in front of him, you switch clothes. Cool? Oh yeah, I always wanted to share clothes with Michael Jackson. Eventually, you'll come across this room with a big guy blocking the exit. Wow, is this the boss? Well, it sure seems like it. Whenever you get close enough to him, he just punches you across the room. This idiot doesn't realize that I'm loaded. You feeling lucky, punk? Huh? What? The bullet bounced right off? Holy crap. And no, dynamite doesn't work either. So after this, I was just wandering around a bit, not really sure where I was supposed to go, when I accidentally fell into the sewer again. And hey, I can actually see this time. Ah, so I guess that wasn't a crack pipe after all, it was just a flashlight. I misjudged you, Harry. So now that we're in the sewers, we're introduced to all new types of hazards. We got mice, electrified wires, and exploding RC cars. Yeah, that's really what they are. What they're doing in the sewer, I have no idea. I should also note that for some reason Harry can suddenly aim down now. Wow, you've been cured. Well, not really. It's only in the sewers that he can do this, and I tried shooting the mice, and it doesn't really seem effective, so yeah, I don't get it. It may seem like we're finally making progress since we're in a new area, but the sewers doesn't really seem to lead anywhere. You have all these switches which don't really seem to do anything, and ladders that lead to much of the same stuff. Everywhere just seems to go on to a dead end. Huh. Yeah, when I first found this dead body, I thought it might lead to a cutscene or a text box or something explaining what's going on, but nope. Just a dead guy in the sewers. Moving on. So after exploring a while, the first sewer just seemed to lead nowhere. Then I found a second one. It was pretty much the same thing, except I came across this platforming segment. Ah, here we go. Now I'm actually gonna get somewhere. Ooh, apparently Harry can't swim. Yeah, the jumping mechanic which I said felt okay earlier does start to get a little annoying here. But to be fair, that was before I realized there was gonna be platforming. It's fine, I'll get it eventually. After all... Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a thing. I drowned so many times that Harry fused with the sewer itself and I got a game over. Well, I guess that's the end of that. You know, as cool as Dirty Harry is as a character, the game could have been a lot better. I appreciate how ambitious they were with the game's content, but the mediocre controls and the burden of having no idea what you're supposed to do or where to go really brings the game down. It actually reminds me a lot of Mad Max for the NES. In fact, as it turns out, Mindscape, the company that made Dirty Harry, also made the Mad Max game. They were even released during the same year. Mindscape, you have some cool ideas, but yeah, you could use some work.
Dirty Harry for the NES. You know, as awesome of a concept that this is, the game itself is pretty mediocre. I'd say it's a little bit better than Mad Max. Well, anyway...
I know what you're thinking, punk. You're thinking that you fire 6 shots or only 5. To tell you the truth, I forgot myself and all this excitement. But being this is a 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and will blow your head clean off, you could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Or do you, punk?
I think I'm gonna go outside and get a breath of fresh air. Hey everyone, bad news. I just don't have a game to review this time. I looked through my collection and didn't see anything worth reviewing, so you guys are gonna have to come back next month. I'm sorry, I don't know what to... Huh, what's this? It's a letter from someone. Dear Jay, I
saw your Tiny Toons Buster Bust Loose review last week and thought, hey, he should do a review on Animaniacs. So, you know, do that thing I just said. Your pal, Mike.
I guess I'm reviewing Animaniacs then. Okay.
Animaniacs was a cartoon that aired in the mid-90s, around the same time as Tiny Toons. The show focused on a trio of anthropomorphic siblings known as the Warner Brothers Yakko and Wacko, and Warner's sister Dot. While they were technically the stars of the show, they were actually more like the hosts, serving as segues for the many different shorts starring other characters. Such featured shorts included The Good Feathers, a parody of The Godfather except with pigeons, Slappy Squirrel, and the Emmy Award-winning Pinky and the Brain. With its sketch show style and genuinely funny humor which appealed to all ages, it's no wonder a video game was made. Let's just hope it's good. The game opens with a typical Pinky and the Brain introduction, with Brain revealing his latest scheme to take over the world. This time he decides that by stealing a script from Warner Brothers Studio, making the film preemptively, and then using the earnings he can fund his plot for world domination. It actually feels like a plot to a... What is that? The animation on Brain's robot body is ridiculous, with its ball legs and arms. How am I supposed to take that seriously? Anyway, As you'd expect, the CEO of Warner Brothers tasks the Warner siblings with finding the missing script pages. No, this isn't an in-game cutscene, the Warners just dance like that whenever you're not moving. It's actually one of the fastest idle animations I've ever seen. The way the game works can be a bit hectic to follow at first, so I'll try to explain. You have a basic jump, a button to pick up items, and a dash button. It looks as though it would control like your usual beat-em-up game, but instead of having free range to walk wherever you want, you're actually locked into specific lanes, usually 3 or 4 depending on the area. You press up and down to switch lanes either while walking or jumping. But this doesn't always work as well as you'd think. Sometimes you'll see a platform that's clearly just 1 lane away, but when you press up or down to try to reach it, your character just won't hop over to it. Another issue is the dash button, which is your main form of attack. Pretty much any enemy in the game is harmed by dashing into them, but instead of simply hitting the button to dash, you have to hit it once to get into dashing position, and then once again to actually get going. I can appreciate what they were going for, but like the lane hopping, it just feels unresponsive at times. Anyway, let's move on to the actual levels. There's 4 main levels in the game, comprising of the movie lots. These are the places you have to defeat in order to unlock the final area, and it's also where you're supposed to find the pages to the stolen script. Another sort of mini stage you can run into on the map is Ralph the security guard. It's more like a punishment though, as you're forced to run away from him and escape. If he does catch you, then you lose one of the Warner siblings. You'd think that this would be an indicator of your lives, but it means a bit more than that. When you're down to one character, then you lose the ability to have checkpoints in the middle of levels. When you continue, however, you only start off with a single Warner, meaning that now, whenever you lose a life, you'll be forced back to the beginning of that area. I've never heard of a game that starts you off with what is essentially 0 lives, after using a continue. And if that doesn't sound bad enough, when you first start the game, you don't have any continues either. Yeah, this game plays hardball right away. You have to earn your first lives. If you haven't already noticed, there's a slot game going on at the bottom of the screen which seems to run at random intervals. What's actually happening is that whenever you collect 5 coins, or 1 golden coin, you get a spin at the slot. If you happen to match some of the good characters up in a row, you earn some more coins, and 100 coins equals a free continue. However, if you get a Pinky, Brain, or Ralph match, then you'll lose some or all of your coins. You can also gain back the missing Warner siblings as well, but instead of gaining enough coins, you're required to match those characters specifically. Strange, but that's how it works. But anyway, let's get back to the stages. The first one I'll be going over is the fantasy stage. Immediately you're put into this auto-scrolling segment where you're chasing the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland while flying on a broom. There's 3 lanes to switch from in this area, and your goal is basically just to watch what the rabbit does and then follow him immediately before crashing into a wall. It can be a bit tricky at first, but once you get the timing down for everything, it's doable. What really made it confusing for me at first is the fact that all the Warners are on their own brooms and usually in different lanes, so it can make it hard to keep track of where I actually am in relation to the rabbit. This would have been easily fixed if they all had just been on the same broom. After this, you're brought to this cloudy area where you have to jump on what looks like Falcor from the Neverending Story. The platforming itself isn't too hard. After this is another auto-scrolling segment, but this time atop a crumbling castle. This part isn't too bad, just avoid bumping into the birds, and make sure you're jumping onto the right lanes during platforming. The only part that really gave me any trouble was where you had to dash to escape the falling debris, but for some reason, the dash would never register the second input needed to actually make your character start running. They would just get into starting position and then fall to their doom. After enough attempts, however, I made it to the final area of the fantasy stage, which takes place inside of a castle. Here you'll find gigantic anvils, jumping cards, and these flipping blocks that you have to jump across. Nothing about this segment is innately difficult, but any small error can result in losing a life, which makes you have to repeat the easy segments over again. Once you reach the end, you'll have to face off against the first boss of the game. At first, this anvil kept killing me because I'm used to giving the boss some space whenever I'm about to fight one in a game, and I didn't realize it was there. The goal here is simply to lead the king under the anvil as it's about to fall and let it smash him. And don't let the king touch you, or that's instant death. All you have to do is smash the king a few times and that's it. A pretty easy first boss. Next up is the aquatic stage. The first part here just has you simply striding the water by either using a barrel or a raft, and also bouncing off the occasional clam. This is probably the easiest segment in the entire game. Some of the lane changes are a bit weird, but other than that, it's pretty smooth sailing. After this, you're on a boat where you switch between basic platforming and fighting giant squids. It's extremely simple, just jump in the cannon and avoid the tentacles. After more of the same, you eventually go up against the level boss. The same squid again, except there's a little pirate guy riding on top of it. Next is the sci-fi stage. This one starts off humorously enough with the alien reference, as your first enemies encountered here are facehuggers bursting out of eggs. There's even an alien itself with an eggplant for a head. It's pretty funny. Soon enough, you come up to this part where you're running from giant bowling balls. It's kinda hard to estimate exactly how you're supposed to jump over these things, and even when you actually figure out the right timing to jump over, your character grazes the bowling balls. It's very strange. After that is this elevator part where you need to hop to the right lanes in order to avoid getting electrocuted. This was a part where the unresponsive controls really gave me some trouble. Sometimes I would tap up multiple times and my character just wouldn't move to avoid the electricity. It becomes even harder when they drop facehuggers down on you. All I could say is to try enough times until you could get the patterns down. The boss of this level is a Terminator parody. All you have to do is hit each switch with your dash move 5 times and avoid the robot as he walks towards you. As long as you're careful and patient, it's a pretty easy fight. You're still not done with the level after that though. There's one final auto-scrolling segment where you need to avoid all these cogs flying at you, including a giant one from the back. This part actually takes place on a single lane, making it a lot less confusing and a lot more fun for me personally. Oh, except this part at the end which totally screws you over out of nowhere. A warning sign shows up which tells you absolutely nothing, and then the giant cog randomly runs you over. I tried going in the empty spots in between at the last second, but it was too late. When I tried again the next time, I survived even though the sides were clearly touching me. I really don't understand this game. Lastly, there's the adventure stage. Considering there's already been a fantasy themed stage, pirate themed stage, and a sci-fi themed stage, this one seems a little vague and generic, but whatever works. So by fantasy, they mean a mixture of a dinosaur area, a jungle area, and an Indiana Jones area including a cameo from Dracula, which probably would have fit more with the horror-themed area. It seems like the game developers just took a bunch of proposed level ideas and threw them all into one. Not too much to mention here besides a mini-boss fight with this gorilla hand robot thing, and the minecart chase with Dracula. Both of these parts are pretty decent. Finally, after you've beaten all the levels, the final one opens up. But before we get to that, let me mention one last thing. Remember how I said you only start off with one Warner sibling after using a continue? Basically making you lose any ability to gain a checkpoint in a specific area? Well, you can actually get them back without the random slot machine. I figured this out really late into the game, but if you enter the tower in the middle of the map, you can regain your lost lives. Of course, you have to go through this tedious elevator segment and avoid enemies to do this, but hey, I guess the game just decided if you want to start off with full lives after using a continue, then you're gonna have to work for it. The final stage is the editing room stage, and this is more like a glorified boss rush instead of an actual level. You just refight all of the bosses from the previous levels and that's it. After that you finally get a face off against Pinky and the Brain. Ouch. Yeah, this is gonna be fun. At first I had no idea what I was supposed to do when they charge at you, since dashing does nothing and you can't jump over them. Then, through absolute chance, I happened to figure out that you can exit one side of the screen and come out of the other, even though nowhere else in the game can you do this. Surprisingly, even after figuring this out, the boss fight is still pretty tough. They'll occasionally drop fire, balls, and robots to try to stop you, which can actually... Wait, fire, balls, robots... This is basically the boss fight from Super Mario World, isn't it? No, not really, because in Super Mario World, the controls actually feel tight enough for you to avoid all these obstacles. Whereas in Animaniacs, you'll just find yourself sliding into enemies and getting killed over and over again. Once in a while, they'll drop nuts and bolts, which you use to deal damage. At first, I wasn't sure if I should throw it at Brain directly, or his chest, or what, since sometimes it just didn't seem to work at all. All I can really say is to keep trying until you beat it. It can be really annoying, but it's not the hardest thing in the world. And honestly, I'm only doing it because I think I deserve an ending after all this. So you beat him, and here's the ending. See that? See their faces right there? That's me. That's me right now, after playing this game. I don't even have to say anymore. That was Animaniacs for Super Nintendo. You know,
I don't know what it was really about this, but this was one of the most annoying games I've played yet. It's not the hardest game I've ever played. It's not the worst game I've ever played. But there's some combination of its awful checkpoint system, the way continues work, the dumb roulette machine thing, the unresponsive controls, and the segments that are programmed specifically to trick you and to piss you off. I didn't like it. No, I thought for some reason, you know what, this game looks pretty good, it's decent, the graphics are really nice. I thought, hey, this game looks pretty decent, but let me tell you, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't judge a game by its cover. I just want to... I've sworn to never destroy a video game, no matter how bad it is. No matter how much it frustrates me, but I just... Hey Mike. See you next week.
Warning. The review you're about to see is on a game that focuses heavily on first experiences. While it won't be covered in its entirety, it's deeply recommended that you stop and check the game out for yourself once the spoiler tag pops up partway through the video. Thank you.
Welcome to J Reviews. You know, usually on this show you'll see me review NES games, or Super Nintendo games, or occasionally the N64 game. This time I'm going to look over a game that actually came out this year. That's right, this is going to be a modern J Reviews. Now this is usually the part where I'd hold the game up for you to see, and while I did originally plan on getting it for the PS4, I ended up buying it during a Steam sale instead. But enough introduction, let's get right into this review. Here's Little Nightmares.
The game opens with dark and obscured imagery of what seems to be a silhouette of a person. But just as it turns around to look at us, the vision ends, and our character awakens from a nightmare. I want you to take in this beginning area just as I did the first time. We seem to be playing as a young girl in a raincoat, who had previously been sleeping on a large suitcase in what looks like a back alley. Right away, the visuals and sounds we hear from this very first screen is incredibly impressive. Look at the lighting effects and the detail in the surrounding area, and just listen to the sound of the puddles splashing. This is all part of what makes this game so immersive, and we're just getting started. I happen to be using a PS4 controller, which I think works better for the platforming segments. The left control stick is used for walking around, while your buttons are used for jumping, ducking, grabbing onto things, and using your lighter to light up dark areas. The grab button is very multi-purpose, used both for hanging onto ledges, pushing or pulling objects, and picking up items, which can be thrown with the jump button. The right control stick is used to survey the area. You are however limited to a single perspective, which is comparable to looking inside of a dollhouse. This isn't a bad thing however, and I feel it lends itself to the way the game works. At first glance, it almost seems like a 2D platformer, but there is plenty of 3D exploring to do in most areas of the game, with the camera doing a great job of shifting to accommodate that. Not far from the starting area, you'll run into your first lantern. Initially it seems to be a save point, but the lanterns and candles you run into are actually there as a bonus challenge, giving you another motive to play through again and light any that you may have missed. Another bonus are these little statues which you must break to collect. The first time I came upon this hatch, which leads out to the starting point, I really begin to appreciate the detail put into how you interact with your environment. It's right after this where you get a real appreciation to the world you're playing in. As you climb these steps, enormous chains come into view which seem to be holding the structure of the building together. But weren't we just in an alleyway before? I love this because it gives off this feeling that you're this tiny little thing wandering around in an uncomfortable and intimidating dreamlike world. The scope of it and the visuals are just fantastic. This theme of being tiny and helpless in a disturbingly surreal environment continues as you come across giant hanging furniture, a ravaged refrigerator, and, yeah. There's so much to take in as you're slowly progressing through that you just can't help but want to see what's coming next. In reality, not much gameplay has really happened up to this point. You may have crawled through some areas and pushed an object in order to reach a door handle, but it's been more segmented exploration than actual challenge. And considering we still have no idea what's really going on story-wise, this is where a lesser game would have definitely started to get boring. But don't worry, all of this build-up is totally worth it. And there are enemies and obstacles. Ah, see? Right on cue.
Oh, what? You don't think that's scary? You're right, it probably doesn't even do anything. Oh. No, yeah. No, it kills you. Yeah, you just want to avoid these guys, which is easy enough. Hey, what's that thing? Let's go find out. Now where am I? Let's see. Oh. Oh. Okay, that's a bit harder. This is your first real trial and error part of the game. On your first attempt, you may wonder what the hell you're supposed to do, but once you find out where the exit is, it's much easier. After your brush with your first real challenge in the game, you're given a platforming puzzle. It's pretty basic. When you use the crank, a light pours in revealing where you need to get to, and all that's required is a quick jump over this gap and a slide using the duck button. Oh, yeah, be careful you don't give yourself brain damage in the process though. Thankfully, after this, you're finally past the leeches. What's that scraping noise? Oh. Let's forget about that. We'll probably never see it again. So after this, you find yourself in what appears to be a nursery, if nurseries had electrified metal bars keeping children from leaving the playroom. You also come across another one of these little guys from earlier. As it turns out, they're called gnomes, and they're actually really friendly. They also like to be hugged, which counts towards another bonus challenge if you can manage to catch them. More interestingly, the gnomes can often lead you to secret rooms, which can reveal more clues to the plot. There sure are a lot of cages in this nursery. I mean, like, a lot of cages. It makes you wonder what's really going on around here. I mean, this place is creepy and all, but is anything even gonna happen? So far, nothing's oh shit! Did he see me?
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The game gives you all this time to take in each new area with very minor obstacles at first. Initially you feel tense and worried. Is something scary going to happen? Is something going to jump out at me? But as soon as you start to feel comfortable that that's not going to happen, and you start progressing at a less cautious pace, bam! That's when they get you. And that's why the experience in this game is so significant.
Speaking of the experience, I have to warn you that if you wish to experience the rest of the game on your own, then it's suggested that you stop this video right now and do so. I'm not going to go through every single aspect of the game, far from it, but there are some mild spoilers coming up as I continue the review. As you progress, your character has these moments where she starts starving for food. The first time this happens, you're lucky enough to have what appears to be an older child throw you some meat. As this continues happening throughout the game, however, these hunger attacks become more severe. And I have to praise the bone-chilling music that plays as the situation intensifies. It's really, really good. There's an amazing payoff with this recurring event, by the way, which I definitely won't spoil here. The first big enemy you face is the janitor, that giant long-armed fellow from earlier. While he's quick and his lanky arms allow him to reach you from great distances, your one saving grace is that he's blind, and he relies on his sensitive ears to catch you. That means you have to be careful about not stepping on creaky floors and sometimes purposely making noise as a distraction. If you accidentally make a sound while you're in a cramped place, then it leads to some really tense moments. All you can do is stay still and pray he doesn't find you. Moving ahead a little bit, I want to talk about another specific moment that I loved my first time playing. After dealing with the janitor, you make your way to an expansive kitchen area, and naturally, a grotesque chef who either thinks you're vermin or decides you might just be a good addition to one of his dishes. He isn't blind like the janitor, but he's a lot slower due to his obesity. Still, it's really nerve-wracking when you hear that squeal and see him running towards you. This leads up to one of my personal favorite revelations I had while playing this game. After making it past the kitchen and moving up to the chef's bedroom in search of the key, you feel like you're finally safe. But then as you enter his room, you notice that he's already sleeping in there. Wow, he's faster than he looks. Then the light comes on. See those portraits on the wall? That's right. 2 beds, 2 toilets. How did I not notice before? The nonsensical and nightmarish nature of the game that's been showcased so far totally threw me off, and I didn't even consider that there's a reason why there's 2 of everything. This is another great example of how the game gets you so distracted with this immersive world and sense of relief between obstacles that it could totally surprise you at any moment. Now I know I've done nothing but praise this game so far, but it isn't without flaws. For one, there are a couple of glitches here and there. Like for instance right here when I tried to pick up this roll of toilet paper and it started spazzing out and teleporting me all over the place.
There's also this part where if you unlock this door, push it open, and then walk back inside, it will lock on you, making it unable for you to progress. Thankfully, you can always restart from your last checkpoint, which usually isn't too far back. This actually brings me to another critique I have. The game is completely based on an autosave feature where it creates frequent checkpoints each time you make progress. While I feel that the system works quite well overall, there are a few times where I feel like it's a little too generous. My biggest example is here near the ending of the kitchen segment. As you make your escape, you're tasked with climbing a tall plate of dishes that the chefs are in the middle of cleaning, before jumping onto a meat hook and hoping you can get away before they can manage to catch you. It's a very thrilling scene as it's the first time two big enemies are after you at the same time, and you know you're just moments away from leaving them behind for good or getting caught and starting all over again. During my first playthrough, I failed to let go of this meat hook and drop to safety in time, and I was caught by one of the chefs. But instead of having me redo the escape segment, it just started me on this dish pile, as if I had already dropped down successfully. This was a little disappointing to me, as I feel it broke up the tension of the big chase. My only other issue is that there are a few moments when the perspective of the camera can throw you off and cause you to die. Such as here with the piano, when it's hard to judge if you're lined up with it or not. Or more especially here when I try to go through this hole but I fall to my death. It even seemed to me like I'd made it through to the other side before falling and dying, but I'm not sure. I think I've said just about all I have to say about Little Nightmares. The visuals, atmospheres, sound, and even pieces of lore you get as you play through the game are all superb, leading to one of the most entertaining and unique gaming experiences I've ever had. The gaming and puzzles found throughout the game are also fun and well balanced for the most part, with minimal flaws overall. It isn't the longest game, taking me around 2.5 hours to beat during my first blind playthrough, but if you get sucked into the story as much as I have, then there's plenty of replay value and definitely more to discover. I even have my own theories. See these long hanging legs that we find early on in the game? What if instead of it just being some random person hanging, it's actually the janitor's legs? Think about it. He already has these super long arms which doesn't match his stubby legs at all. And if you look at his room, it's filled with gigantic furniture that's even too tall for him to reach. But he would be able to use it if his legs were just a bit longer. Maybe he lost them somehow. I'm not usually a DLC type of person, as I often like to view a game as a whole single piece of work, but there is a DLC chapter out there which is supposed to shed some light on the game's world, with more coming in the near future. And if there's one game that I'd be willing to try extra content for, then it'd probably be this one. While I love the vague yet compelling story that Little Nightmares tells in its main mode, I sincerely hope that it doesn't jump the shark with the DLC, and only continues to expand its universe in new and more interesting ways. Alright, I think I've rambled long enough. I want to end this on possibly my favorite visual in the entire game. Now this takes place during the beginning of the second to last chapter, so one more spoiler warning. As you make your way higher and higher, you finally reach a window of what appears to be the outside world, and an explanation to the swaying and rocking that seems to happen once in a while. Just look at that. Your tiny yellow figure ascending the side of this enormous ship, the water crashing beneath, the boat horn, the seagulls, the large intimidating figures all boarding the ship that is the world you've been experiencing so far, the way that they're blurred off in the background, yet marching in such a detailed way that it begins to feel more like a professionally animated film than just a video game. Finally, as these creatures begin to come into focus, it hits you. I just had to deal with two big enemies at once right now. Is this what I gotta look forward to next? Oh man.
So that was Little Nightmares. If you haven't realized by now, I'm in love with this game. I'm usually more of a retro gamer focused on playing challenging yet simple games from the 80s or 90s, but this game took me totally by surprise. It's not often that a modern game can make me this enthusiastic, so take my word for it. You don't want to sleep on this game. Well, that's it for today. See you next time.
Hey guys, welcome to J Reviews. You know, I don't really bring this up too often, but I'm actually a big fan of fighting games, particularly the Street Fighter series. I never really thought I'd have the opportunity to review one though, because fighting games are very straightforward compared to most genres, and I didn't think that taking you through one step by step in a J Review style would be that interesting. That is, until I found this game. So why did this one inspire me to do a review when others didn't? Let's get right into it and find out. This is World Heroes. When Street Fighter II was released to arcades in early 1991, it basically cemented fighting games as a legitimate game genre forever, introducing the concept of warriors from all over the world duking it out, each character with their own personal story, and emphasis on special moves and combos. While the original Street Fighter had many of these attributes, it was the sequel that really helped amplify and fine-tune these features. As expected, Street Fighter II's success inspired a plethora of clones, most ranging from pretty bad to mediocre. Games like Martial Champion and Kaiser Knuckle took a pretty basic approach, with some of its Street Fighter influences being pretty blatant, while other games like Clay Fighter took more of a parody route. The only other company that even held a candle to Capcom in terms of fighting games back then was SNK, particularly with its Fatal Fury series. These games, however, started off less as a Street Fighter clone and more like an estranged child. Released in late 1991, the first game in the series was in development alongside Street Fighter II, and was actually directed and developed by the creator of the original Street Fighter, Takashi Nishiyama. As both series evolved throughout the years, they diverged more and more from one another, each having their own fighting game style and feel. Of course, today's review isn't about originality. It's actually quite the opposite. So let's cut to the chase and get right into it. First of all, I have to mention the title, World Heroes. This is an obvious reference to Street Fighter II's original subtitle, The World Warrior. On its own, it just sounds really generic though. World Heroes could be any kind of game, which might be why I've never heard of it until very recently. It was originally developed by SNK, but ported to the Super Nintendo by Sunsoft, or reprogrammed as it says in the title screen. This is why the cartridge says 16 megs of arcade action, which is funny to see considering SNK's usual boast being much higher on the Neo Geo. So the plot takes Street Fighter's concept and brings it to a whole other level, with the player not only traveling to different countries, but also through time itself to face off against the world's greatest opponents. That's made possible by Dr. Brown here. Yeah, his name is Dr. Brown. Sounds a little familiar, right?
You came at the right time. Use the time machine to go all over the world where the strong people are.
Yeah, go to where all the strong people are. That's some really eloquent words for a doctor. After this brief intro, you're taken to the character select screen, of which there are 8 available, just like in World Warrior. The menu here is a bit bland, but at least they didn't go all the way and add in a map of the world in the background like in Street Fighter. Oh. Well, you can't win them all. Since this is my first time playing, I'm gonna go with the obligatory Ryu clone to try to get a feel for things. Here, his name is Hanzo Hattori. No, not that one. Or that one. After this, you get to choose between normal, which is like arcade mode, and fatal match. I'm not sure what that is yet, but if the giant wrestler putting someone in a sharpshooter while they're both on fire is accurate, I gotta check that out later. For now, we'll just start with normal. First battle, we're going to France to battle Jane. Or is that Jean? So right away it feels pretty familiar, with Ryu's down forward punch to fire a Hadoken working exactly the same here. So I guess it's safe to say that the rest of the moves will work the same, with there being 3 buttons for different punches and 3 for different kicks. So, wait a second, half of my buttons aren't working. At first I thought my controller might be busted, but that wasn't the case. As it turns out, the game defaults to a mode where only 3 buttons are used for attacking, even though there's actually 2 kinds of punches, 2 kicks, and a throw. The reason for this is because the standard Neo Geo controller only has 4 buttons, not counting select or start. There's 2 reasons why this doesn't make sense though. For one, this is the Super Nintendo version. Since games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat make use of all 6 buttons, you'd think that Sunsoft would have known to have it set to where you can utilize them all. The second reason is even stranger. In Street Fighter, there isn't a dedicated throw button, so instead it uses a system where you get close to your opponent and then press the correct attack and direction of choice simultaneously to throw them. World Heroes uses a throw button instead, which is fine if this was the only way to throw your opponent, but the Street Fighter method actually works too, making the button pointless, and then a 4th button going completely wasted. It doesn't make sense. So anyway, back to the actual game. As expected, it plays more or less like a sloppier version of World Warrior. Basically, it feels like the characters are fighting on the moon. Speaking of the characters, let's go over them. Hanzo and Fuma are the Ryu and Ken clones, except this time as ninjas from rival clans. Instead of a hurricane kick, they do this really ridiculous maneuver that involves hurling their entire bodies into a spin cycle. There's Dragon, the Bruce Lee knockoff that actually predates Fei Long, and has a really OP move if he can get you into a corner. Jane actually reminds me of Charlotte from Samurai Showdown, which also happens to feature a character named Hanzo Hattori. Once again, no relation. There's Julius Karn, a Mongolian warrior whose body type and moveset reminds me a little bit of Blanca. There's Muscle Power, an obvious homage to professional wrestler Hulk Hogan. He even says #1 in his win taunt, which is a reference to the catchphrase Ichiban he used when he used to wrestle in Japan in the early 80s. Next up is Brocken, a German cyborg soldier who was built in some point in history. I'm sure no time in particular. Apparently he was based off of Stroheim from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, another cyborg soldier. Anyway, he's M. Bison. He just is. Look at him. He's Bison. Or Vega if you're from Japan. Finally, there's Rasputin, based on the real-life Russian mystic Gregory Rasputin. There's something really uncomfortable about his special attacks, which involve him using these giant glowing hands and feet. One of his moves has him holding his opponent while he does this creepy laugh. Ugh. When you beat the final hero, the award ceremony is about to take place when somebody interrupts it. Ah, final boss, now we're talking. None other than G-Gus. G-Gus? That's not a name. That's just somebody saying G-Gus. What? Okay. Okay, so G-Gus shows up, and he says you have to fight him or he'll You have to fight him or he'll Sorry, excuse me. You have to fight him or he'll smash the earth. Oh boy. Whew. Alright, let's see what this guy could do. Alright, so when G-Gus isn't standing still and just letting you attack him, he's pointlessly turning into other characters while using their moves even less effectively than they do. Basically, G-Gus is as pathetic as his name. After this really disappointing boss fight, you get to see your character's ending. He did it! Hanzo's won! Hey, where did Hanzo go? No, they didn't. Oh my god, they really did. They just took Ryu's ending from Street Fighter 2. It's the same exact ending. I don't think I've ever seen a knockoff step this dangerously close into plagiarism. It's crazy. Alright, one more thing and we're done here. Let's check out that fatal match mode from earlier. So at first glance, it's exactly like the normal mode where you just fight each character until you get to the boss, including these bonus stages from earlier which I failed to mention because reasons. But actually there's a catch. Each match has random booby traps set up around the arena. There's electrified ropes, spiked walls, ring of fire matches, landmines, and even slippery floors designed to launch you into each of these hazards. As crazy and over the top as these seem, they're actually not too far off from the popular Japanese death matches that many wrestlers were doing at the time. One of the most famous examples being the match between wrestling legends Mick Foley and Terry Funk, which involved barbed wire ropes and actual explosives in the ring. Fatal Match Mode brings really interesting environmental damage to the table, which helps distract from the game's various flaws which are much more noticeable during the normal mode. There are some glitches that occur here with the game's physics when doing certain moves, but overall it just makes the mode more hectic and fun to play. To be honest, Fatal Match is probably the best thing about this game, and likely the only reason I'd ever consider playing it again. That was World Heroes. Overall, the game is expectedly unimpressive, and it only really attracted me because of how absurd it could be at times. If they had focused more on the Fatal Match mode, it could have really stood out from the other clones of the time, and it could have even been a pretty decent game in its own right. As it is, however, I can only really recommend it to fighting game fans who might just want to get a decent laugh out of it. Well, that's my review for the month. See you next time. Oh. Didn't see you there. Yeah, I was just thinking about how crazy it is that Super Mario Bros. 2 in the US was originally a completely unrelated title in Japan called Doki Doki Panic.
Now I know most of you probably know that already, but it just got me thinking, what other NES games got drastically changed when they were re-released here in North America? Rhetorical question, I actually have one right here called Dragon Power. While the cover may not ring any bells immediately, there's a good chance you'll recognize the source material. Let's get into it.
Dragon Power. This story begins ages ago, deep inside the mountains, far, far away from the city. Okay, so far, it's a pretty generic setup. Let's continue. Goku and Nora. Alright, hold up. Goku and Nora? So yeah, enough beating around the bush. The Japanese version of Dragon Power was actually one of the very first video game adaptations of the Dragon Ball series. I'm sure most of you watching this right now already know what that is, but just in case, I'm gonna have a quick run through. So Dragon Ball starts off with this teen girl named Bulma driving around in the middle of the mountains in search of the 7 Dragon Balls, mystical items that when joined together are supposed to grant the owner of them any wish they desire. Having already found 2 and on her way to the 3rd's location, she runs into a small boy named Goku who, besides his wacky hairstyle and ape-like tail, has the distinct feature of being extremely strong. Not just for a kid either, he destroys Bulma's car with his bare hands. After Bulma realizes that Goku was given a Dragon Ball by his deceased grandfather, she convinces him to join her on an adventure to find the rest. Now you might be wondering why they changed it from Dragon Ball to Dragon Power overseas. Well, for one, Dragon Ball just didn't exist yet in the US. This game came out in 1986, and we wouldn't see the anime debut on American television until the mid-90s. So what changes did they make exactly besides changing the name? Well, first off, we could see that Bulma has been changed to Nora for whatever reason, and instead of Dragon Balls, which I admit did sound really weird when I first heard it, the duo are instead searching for the 7 Crystal Balls. When you hit start, the game brings you to the first chapter, Turtle Hermit. So they did keep Master Roshi, the lecherous old hermit who would become Goku's martial arts master. We also get an amusingly vague cutscene right before the stage begins. Okay, let's go on a trip. How do we search? Good thing we watched the menu cutscene or we'd have no idea what they're talking about. So Bulma, Nora, gives Goku a piece of meat. No, sorry, that's the Dragon Radar, in order to find the rest of the Crystal Balls. Wait, if they're searching for Crystal Balls, then why is it still called the Dragon Radar? The level starts in a top-down perspective with your only moves being jumping and punching. You have some basic enemies which go down with a punch or two and drop random items. I have to say that the controls feel quite stiff here, and so far I see no reason for there to be a jump button. But it is playable for now. At first I thought that the enemies were dropping bombs after dying since they explode with a puff, but after items started appearing then I realized that they were actually capsules, another reference to Dragon Ball that would probably be lost on the game's American players of the time. Items include turtle shells that seem to do nothing but be collecting value, triangle sandwiches that increase your speed temporarily, a handy staff, and food which increases Goku's health. And speaking of his health, is it dropping? That's right. Even when you're not taking damage, Goku's health is actually constantly dropping as you play, meaning that you must keep picking up health items if you want to survive. And you only have 1 life, so game over and you have to start the level all over again. While this is a really annoying game mechanic that reminds me a lot of the Gauntlet arcade series where it forced players to enter more quarters to keep their characters alive, it actually does make some sense. Goku was known for his huge appetite in the series, and would often find it hard to fight when hungry. It just doesn't translate all that well in a game format. Early in the first level, you enter a section which changes the game to a side-scrolling perspective as you fight an enemy one-on-one. The idea here is to avoid his attacks while getting your own in, but there doesn't seem to be any good strategy to do this. There's a jumping kick, but that doesn't really seem to help much. As far as I could tell, your best bet is to just go in like a tank and beat him before your health gets too low. After this, Nora gets kidnapped, you beat up some more guys, and you have another boss fight, and that's it. After rescuing Nora, you're onto the next section of the level with stronger enemies. While the first section was extremely straightforward, I actually wasn't really sure where to go here. The path leads to a brick wall which seems impassable. After some goofing around, I did figure out that walking into random walls can lead into caves, but they just contain more enemies and items. Besides that, everything just appears to be a dead end. Seriously, where do I go? I touched and punched that wall multiple times, but now it triggers a scene suddenly? Weird. So once you return the turtle to the hermit, he rewards you with the swift cloud, which totally has no relation to the flying nimbus. Nora says she wants it too, which I don't see how that's an issue since he just gave it to Goku and they're traveling together anyway. But the hermit demands that she give him her sandwich in return. The turtle then asks, why do you and hermit want it? Norma obliges, sandwiches fly around the hermit, and everything turns red. Yeah, I'd be confused too if I were you. Referring back to the Japanese version again, this scene goes a little bit differently. Master Roshi doesn't ask Bulma for her sandwich, he asks her for... yeah, I can see why they censored this. After this is Chapter 2, Pudgy. The whole level here is basically you trying to find this shapeshifter named Pudgy, yeah that's Oolong by the way, who has been terrorizing a small village. There isn't really any strategy to this, you just go in all of these huts and hit these things until you find him, and dealing with enemies along the way. If you find him enough times, he gives up. After this is this ridiculous desert level. The 5 crystal balls you have now get stolen by a bandit and you have to retrieve them. Of course, they're spread all over the map with hazards guarding them all. This time there's even stronger enemies and even bombs that send shrapnel flying everywhere. The worst though are these bees guarding this Dragon Ball. The stiff controls weren't too much of a problem before, but now it's made trying to survive extremely difficult. And the fact you're supposed to retrieve all of the balls on one life is just absurd. You're going to be seeing the game over screen a lot. Even if you manage to avoid damage, you still lose health over time, and since item drops are completely random, with sometimes enemies dropping nothing at all, you're often too low on health to even make a good attempt. To make things worse, you have to battle Lancer for one of the balls. Yeah, Yamcha. And he's just annoying to fight. He jumps all over the place and just one hit deals 30 damage. If only there was a way to reliably grind health before fighting him, but it's left completely to chance. Never thought I'd see Yamcha kicking Goku's butt. Another mildly annoying thing is that you have to press select at the game over screen to return to the menu and then start to actually continue. I know it's not that big of a deal, but I always instinctively mash the start button when I get a game over so I could try again. And then select at the menu screen actually changes the options selected, so why would they change the controls up like that? Oh great, look, lost again. Oh hey, I actually picked up a lot of health items this time. Now I just got... oh, come on. Oh, I picked up a staff this time. Maybe this'll help. Nope.
Come on, come on, come on. No. Did I just...
Yeah, I did. I restarted the game by accident. Yeah, I think I'm done here.
Alright, Dragon Power. When I first found out there was a Dragon Ball game for the NES, albeit in a butchered form, I actually got pretty excited. Considering the time difference between Dragon Ball and the NES in my mind, it was like the equivalent of finding out that there's a Breaking Bad game for the Dreamcast. Okay, Dragon Ball is not Breaking Bad, but the point I'm trying to make is, this could have been really fun. Unfortunately, the mix of sticky controls, unreliable item drops, and a stingy health system made it more of a chore to play than a treat. That's about it for this one, guys. Now remember, don't judge a book by its cover. Except this one, because it's not very good.
What looks like the spirit of whatever was haunting the mansion is released, and the credits start to roll. Whew, it's finally over.
This one actually ended on a pretty positive note. You saved your girlfriend, the mansion is gone, and the mask has finally stopped haunting Rick. I hope.
Yeah, I don't know what to do, Mike. I just keep having these weird dreams, and every time it's this mask, and it won't leave me alone.
That sounds pretty crazy, man. Hey, you keep mentioning a mask. Wasn't there some kind of creepy mask that followed you around in those Splatterhouse games you were reviewing for Halloween?
Well, yeah, but those were just games. This is like something's haunting my dreams or something.
Maybe it's your subconscious telling you need to finish that series.
I don't know. I heard the third game wasn't nearly as good as the first two. Like, apparently they turn into a beat 'em up or something.
What's wrong with beat 'em ups?
Well, nothing, but Splatterhouse was really unique, and a lot of that was due to the gameplay. Simplifying it into a beat 'em up takes a lot away from it. It's kind of a shame. I don't think I'd have that much to say about it.
Well, just review it and get it over with then.
Well, maybe you're right. Oh, you sure you're not going to make it back to town in time for Halloween?
Nah, I can't. I got this zombie-themed pub crawl I've got to go to.
Well, have fun. Hey guys, it's Halloween, and you know what that means. It's time for my annual, mandatory, spooky game review. Today I'm going to be looking at another Sega Genesis game, a console that I still don't own yet, which means I'm going to be using the normally forbidden emulator. But hey, at least I still have this controller adapter, so I can still use a Super Nintendo controller instead of a keyboard to play, because who wants to do that? But enough of that. Let's get right into let's get to that game review. So the first thing I noticed when booting up the game is the disappointing lack of story explanation. The first Splatterhouse didn't have any text in the opening scene, but it visually shows you how Rick and his girlfriend Jennifer make their way into a spooky mansion on a rainy night, and she ends up getting kidnapped. Then the demonic terror mask attaches to Rick, empowering him to help him rescue Jennifer. She tragically ends up being turned into a monster until being killed by Rick, and afterwards the evil entity that seemed to be haunting the mansion is defeated and released, the home itself destroyed in the aftermath. The terror mask explodes before reforming itself after the credits end, complete with an unsettling laugh. Splatterhouse 2 actually goes more in depth during the opening by explaining that it's been 3 months since Rick escaped the Splatterhouse mansion in the first game, and he's been tormented by nightmares of the deceased Jennifer. The mask summons Rick to a new location, another mansion located on a tiny island near the old one, and tells him that Jennifer can still be saved. This game actually has a happier conclusion, with Rick successfully rescuing Jennifer this time, leaving the second mansion to sink into the lake. However, there still lies a cliffhanger at the end, with the mask still in one piece, and what looks to be the spirit of the mansion from the first game floating out of the water. You'd think that the third and final game would start with an explanation of what happens, right? Nope. All we get is this floating red crystal and a bunch of ghostly faces surrounding it. Then we see Rick wearing the terror mask while the title of the game slowly scrolls in front of him. After this, we see Jennifer in a bright light, surprisingly played by what seems to be a real-life digitized actress. Finally, we end on seeing the terror mask again with its signature laugh, before being left at the menu screen. Okay, what's going on here? What's that red crystal thing? Did Jennifer get kidnapped again? Why is there another mansion on the menu screen? The first one burned down and the second one sunk into a lake, so where'd this one come from? Okay, so as it turns out, the manual actually explains what's going on here. Mostly. So we're gonna look at that to avoid confusion. Splatterhouse 3 takes place 5 years after the last game. With the horrors of the terror mask behind them, Rick and Jennifer get married and have a kid named David, with Rick actually becoming very successful on Wall Street and earning enough to buy his family their own mansion. Wait, really? This guy went through not one, but 2 horrible and traumatizing experiences involving mansions, and he's just gonna live in one? That's like if Tom Hanks' character in Castaway returned home after 4 years on a deserted island and then immediately thought, you know what? I think I'll go on a boat cruise. It's like he's just asking for trouble. Right away, we're greeted by the terror mask, and no, he's not telling you the backstory like I just did. He's actually just giving you, the player, some semi-vague instructions. Looking at the mask again, it's interesting how its design has changed over the years. In the first game, it was an obvious knockoff to Jason's hockey mask, and in the second, they changed it up so it looked more like a skull. This time, however, it's sort of like a mix between the original mask and a skull. I actually think it might be my favorite. The game itself, though, knowing when to use certain kinds of attacks, how each enemy works, placement of hazards, and of course having a decent skill in platforming were all necessary when trying to reach the boss at the end of each level. Splatterhouse 3 works a bit differently. Instead of a linear path to the stage boss, there's many different directions you can head while making your way to your destination, marked here on the map. The biggest change, however, is the gameplay, taking the side-scrolling strategized gorefest of the original games and turning it into a much more simplified beat-em-up, with Rick now moving in 3 dimensions. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with beat-em-ups, there's plenty of good ones out there, but they do have a penchant for being very mindless and monotonous, and that pretty much stays true here. Rick has a punch which leads into a basic combo if you tap it 4 times, a weak jump kick used to clear some space, and a grab which lets you either throw the enemy or get some free hits in. There's also a special spin kick move, but we'll get more into that later. The first room just has a couple lowly goons that are incredibly easy, going down with a single punch combo. After clearing a room, you can pause to take a look at the floor map and try to figure out the fastest route before the timer runs out, while occasionally a cutscene plays between rooms. Looks like Jennifer's in trouble. I guess we know why we're in a rush now. There's other enemies like these fat guys, but so far they don't really seem to be any different from the other monsters besides the fact that they have more health. I'm not sure what the white doors are exactly, but the yellow ones lead you to rooms with extra lives and also teleport you to other areas of the mansion, giving you yet another route to take. You can use weapons such as this cinder block, which can be quite effective, but if you don't pick it back up right away once it falls to the floor, a ghost will come and take your weapon away. There's also these power stones, not related, which can transform Rick into an even more hulking monster that packs more power and takes less damage. Okay, there's just one room now before I reach Jennifer, but it's this super long hallway. The enemies here are just as easy, but one annoying thing is that you can't scroll the screen back after you move forward, meaning that if an enemy gets knocked out of bounds, then you have to wait for him to walk back on screen before you can finish him off. And all of this on a time limit. This isn't challenging, just plain annoying. Ugh, the time is about to run out. I don't know if I can make it. 3, 2, 1. Huh? I didn't get a game over or lose a life. I guess the timer doesn't matter. Oh, Jennifer is destroyed? What? What is she, a fortress in a tower defense game? Okay, all joking aside, there's a boss fight here, meaning I wasn't even close to saving her anyway. He is a bit stronger than the regular enemies, but once again, he's more annoying than anything. Most of his attacks aren't too hard to avoid, but he loves running away and jumping all over the place. His acid seems mostly used to just keep you back from attacking, and his swipe knocks you down. Did I mention Rick takes a really long time to get up after being knocked down? Yeah, he really milks it. Oh, and you should see when you lose a life. The mask takes its sweet time reviving Rick, clearly suggesting that every single action in the game is purely designed to slow you down rather than actually be a difficult challenge. Now would be a good time to put those power stones to use, and it seems like the easiest way to do fast damage to the boss is to grab him while he tries to scurry around you. It shouldn't take too much to put him down. After this, we get a cutscene of the mask really emphasizing the fact that Jennifer was killed and that Rick should use his rage against him. Not really sure who him is, but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. The next stage takes place on the second floor of the mansion, and with Jennifer destroyed, the evil one taunts Rick about the death of his preckless wife. Okay, I'm gonna ignore that low-hanging fruit and focus on the evil one. To my knowledge, the game never actually specifies who the evil one is, but if I had to guess, it's probably the spirit of the mansion seen both in the endings of the first and second games. The second level plays the same as the first, with you trying to reach your destination before the time runs out. Though the timer seems pointless here, since the last stage we had the occasional reminder that Jennifer was in danger, and this one simply shows Rick getting bullied. There's new enemies, such as these lumpy guys, but they basically just have more health, and they're just as easy to kill. These red fat guys though are actually quite a pain. They were just big meat shields before, but now a single attack from them takes nearly your entire health bar away, even at full health. The best strategy here is just to play it safe and attack while they're open, and stay out of their path when they're acting aggressive. The final boss here starts off a lot more annoying than the first, with these barrage of leeches that knock you away from the boss with every little hit. If the timer was actually significant for this level, then this would be a lot more frustrating than it is. After finally reaching the boss, however, he's actually a piece of cake, with pretty much every move making contact with ease and grabbing being particularly effective. Stage 3 raises the stakes yet again, with Rick's son being the one in danger this time. This image of Rick is actually pretty cool, but he looks a lot leaner here than he does in-game, which is a bit strange. Once again, some new enemies are introduced, but mainly as just more easy monsters to button mash. The main difficulty comes once again from these fat monsters that can kill you in just a bite or two. The only other notable thing is this long hallway part where you have to get past an evil library. Since they hardly do any damage, this is mostly just another way to eat up your limited time. Speaking of, looks like I'm not gonna make it again. When you finally reach David's room, his soul seems to be sucked out of his body and this giant teddy bear comes to life. Could it be that perhaps the soul of our son was transferred into this giant stuffed teddy bear? Maybe we should be careful. Nope, that's definitely not David. This is a basic beat 'em up boss fight here. You use the power mode if you have to and just beat him up. After this, Rick asks where the real David is, and the mask informs him that his son has been taken by the evil one in order to free the Dark Stone, which I can only assume is the red floating crystal thing from the opening of the game. Next up is the basement. It was at this point that I realized I was really gonna have to learn how to adapt to the game if I wanted to win. Here's where the spin kick comes in. The spin kick is a special move performed by pressing back, forward, and then punch. Not only does it put you into an invincible state and attack all around you, but it actually does more damage than anything else in your arsenal by far. I would originally perform this by accident, but had no idea how powerful it was until I began using it purposely. Not only is this necessary for clearing out enemies that are surrounding you, but it's also the fastest way to kill most of the monsters in the game. The timing of the move can be a bit tricky to pull off, but it's a must if you want to get far. The other important move you need to know is the grab. You can just spin kick if there's two at a time, but if there's one, grabbing is the easiest and safest way to go. This also goes for pretty much every single boss in the game, with the grab moves being particularly effective in the powered up state. And now for these floating rags. Wouldn't you believe it? The grab works here too. Float away from this, you jerks. Now we're on to another boss, this floating orb thing. I don't have much time, but with my new tactics at use, I may just win. Yeah, I think I really may be able to beat the timer this time. Oh, nope. He's taking his sweet time transforming. Oh great, so as usual I eventually beat the boss and then... yeah. Sorry Rick, I know you're having a rough day. Next up is the final stage, which just says the Dark Stone, which is a funny name for the floor of the mansion. Besides the new background, there's nothing particularly special about this stage. The basic enemies you face here are the hardest yet, but nothing really new. If you manage to make it to the end, you'll come face to face with the Dark One himself. Huh, he's really slimmed down since Splatterhouse 2. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but his attacks are mostly just annoying time wasters instead of actually being deadly. But what's the point? Does the timer even matter anymore? I do like this one attack though, which sorta looks like a boss from the last game. There isn't much else to say here. Use the old grab and smash technique and you'll put this boss away eventually. So after all that, your friend the Mask congratulates you and... oh. Wow, so the Mask has been friendly since the first game, and finally after all of this, he reveals that he was trying to use Rick to take over the world? Yeah, what is definitely the proper response. So the final level is a boss fight with the Mask itself, and wow, just look at that timer. God, just how long and epic will this battle be? Well, I guess this is what the entire series has been leading up to. Wait. How can I be fighting the Mask while I'm still wearing it? Whatever. He's honestly not that intimidating. He's about the same size as I am while I'm powered up, and the grabbing method is working just fine. Whoa. Okay, giant Mask. He's teleporting around and... wow, yeah. Okay, now this is a final boss fight. Did I just beat him? Like that? Same method as every other boss in the game? Well, that was surprisingly easy. The horror of last night's battle has vanished. The sky is clear and blue. With the evil one and the terror mask gone, Rick can finally live in peace, though he is alone without his family. Kind of a rough ending to the trilogy, but at least it's finally over. And that was Splatterhouse 3. I beat it. I got the bad ending, but I beat it. So that was Splatterhouse 1, Splatterhouse 2, and now Splatterhouse 3. Whole series done. So I don't need this anymore. And I don't need this anymore. So yeah, that's it. That was the J reviews for the month. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna go put this stuff away because Halloween is finally over. Feeling good. Won't need these anymore. It was just a dream, Jay. I gotta relax. You're not real. You're just a nightmare. Did you stop? Is it? You want me to keep playing the game, don't you? Or you don't want me to keep playing the game? This is because I got the bad ending, isn't it? Fine. Okay, we need to beat this game and we're gonna get the good ending this time. What the hell's going on? He cut my controller cord. You think I need this? I'll beat it with the keyboard. I don't care. Okay, you want the good ending, huh? Well, I'm gonna give it to you. I'll use your stupid spinning kick that doesn't want to work half the time, and I'll deal with your long hallways that won't let you scroll for some reason, and whatever. Come on, we gotta save Jennifer first. Wow, the timer even keeps going during the boss's death animation. They really wanted to piss people off. But hey, I made it, and with some time to spare too. So now that Jennifer is saved... Oh wait, apparently she has a boar worm inside of her now, eating her alive. Yeah, as it turns out, the second stage timer isn't for nothing after all. Now we have to hunt down this big boar worm and kill him before Jennifer gets turned into a mindless monster. Alright, we're doing good on time here, now we just gotta beat the boss. The worm gorges on Jennifer's brain. You didn't save her in time. What? Bullshit, I didn't save her in time. There's almost 2 minutes left on the clock. Whatever, I'm just gonna keep going. The boar worm has stopped feasting on Jennifer's flesh. Wait, did I save her in time? What's going on here? On to the third stage. Okay, once again, I beat the boss with time to spare, and it changed nothing? David still got kidnapped, so apparently it was the third stage that actually had the pointless timer. Stage 4 boss, you're next. And I beat him rather easily too, but just look at how long his death animation takes while the clock continues to tick down. 10 seconds. 10 whole seconds that could screw over someone's good playthrough even though the boss has already been defeated. Well, at least I was able to save David. As you may have guessed, you can take all the time you want to beat stage 5, so as long as you could do that, you're fine. After that, you just fight what is probably one of the easiest end bosses in gaming history, and that's it. The ending scene has much happier music, with the mask finally confirmed to be gone for good, and Rick left to enjoy the company of his family once again. Now, it's finally over. So, in conclusion, Splatterhouse 3 was pretty mediocre. It's not really an awful game, but it gets pretty repetitive, and the difficulty is based more on learning a couple little tricks that work on pretty much every single enemy in the game, rather than having to adapt to new challenges like in the first two titles. It's a pretty lackluster end to the series, but that being said, it is the end, which means that I don't have to worry about that mask anymore every time Halloween comes around. What? No. You know what? It's just a mask. Who cares? It's just a dumb mask. Seriously? No. You know what? I'm not running away from you anymore. Mike? That was you? That's not cool, man.
What? I mean, I just thought I'd give you a little scare, you know. It was just a prank.
You were threatening me with an axe earlier and you call that a prank?
An axe? I just have this mace. It's made of rubber.
Yeah, earlier. In the garage?
In the garage. I've been in your closet all day.
Oh, that's a baseball!
Hey everyone, welcome to Jay Reviews. Now I know you're probably saying, Jay, we know why we're here, just get on with the review already. So I'm gonna do just that. Let's take a look at JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for the Super Nintendo. Next you're going to say, but Jay, how can you review a Super Nintendo game that doesn't exist? Well, you're only about half right. Let's get into it, and I'll tell you why. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a Japanese manga series that made its debut in Shonen Jump magazine in 1987 and is written and illustrated by Hirohiko Araki. The ongoing series centers around the Joestar family and is split into multiple parts, with the first focusing on Jonathan Joestar, who lives in 19th century Great Britain, and each subsequent part focusing on another one of his descendants. JoJo would go on to become one of the most successful manga series of all time, but it wasn't until 2012 when the anime series came out that it would eventually strike it big with Western audiences as well. So why is all this important? Well, it's because the JoJo game I'm reviewing today came out in 1993, and since that was nearly 20 years before Western audiences had any idea JoJo was even a thing, the game was understandably only ever released in Japan. This means that the only way for someone living in America like me to play the game would be to get a Super Famicom and a Japanese version of the game. But even then it wouldn't be very feasible to play since the game requires a lot of reading, and I can't read Japanese. Luckily I happened to find an emulated version online that was translated into English. Thanks Aeon Genesis. So without further ado, let's review this thing. I could give some backstory to what this game's about, but I'm sure the game itself will fill people in just in case they're not too familiar with the series. Alright, there's some guy in a blue outfit. Oh,
Get out, you're coming home.
who's that?
Get lost, old man. Sorry you had to come all the way from New York, but you're not gonna be any help here.
What? New York? Where?
Avdol, you're up.
Who? That's right, I also have what you call an evil spirit.
Whoa, hold on. So there's some guy in jail who doesn't want to leave, so some old guy comes from New York and tries to bring him back home, and then another guy comes in and starts talking about evil spirits or something?
Oh my god!
What's going on here? Right away, it's clear why this game was never released outside of Japan. It doesn't take any time to actually explain the premise of this part of the series and instead dives right in, expecting you to know everything already. So for those of you that have never seen or read JoJo, I'll fill you in. The game follows the events of Part 3 of the series titled Stardust Crusaders. It focuses on Japanese high school student Jotaro Kujo, who one day finds out that he has some spirit inside of him that no one else could seem to see. Joseph Joestar, Jotaro's grandfather and the main character of JoJo Part 2, travels to Japan in order to help his disturbed grandkid who at this point has locked himself in prison to avoid hurting anybody with his spirit. Joseph, with the help of his good friend Avdol, informed Jotaro that the evil spirit he's concerned about is actually something called a stand, a powerful entity that is a physical representation of the user's fighting spirit, with most stands being invisible to non-users' eyes. The way they decide to teach him, of course, is by having Avdol fight Jotaro with his own stand. In-game cutscenes aren't out of the ordinary, but this part of the game is a bit strange, as it utilizes an auto-programmed usage of the in-game fighting system, not in a tutorial sense either, but just as a means to portray the fight between the two of them instead of actually animating a cutscene. Anyway, to put the rest in a nutshell, Joseph tells Jotaro that a wicked and seemingly immortal man named Dio has stolen the body of their ancestor, the very first JoJo, Jonathan, and has awakened from a 100-year sleep. Apparently, Dio's awakening somehow triggered the stands manifesting in the Joestar family as well as others, and it's their duty to fight Dio before he uses his own stand for evil. When you actually get to control the game, you start off in Jotaro's room. As previewed in the prison scene, the game plays as a turn-based RPG, though the gameplay outside of battle is probably not what you'd expect. Whereas most JRPGs have a top-down perspective for exploring towns, encountering enemies, and generally progressing through the game, and older dungeon crawler RPGs tend to have a first-person perspective, JoJo goes in an entirely different route by having this close-up side-scrolling perspective where you can only walk on a two-dimensional plane. And for some reason the aspect ratio of the visuals are this super wide screen. It feels like I'm watching Ben-Hur or something. Actions you can do while in this mode include the standard checking your items, talking to nearby people, and checking your surroundings. The fourth option is called Tear It, which can be used once Avdol joins your team and you find cards for him to read, which will then give you a bonus. As if the side-scrolling RPG element wasn't strange enough, the check actions work like a point-and-click game, with you moving a cursor around to click on objects or people. This could have made things more interesting, but unfortunately none of the background objects in the game give any humorous or interesting dialogue when checked out, like many other games of this genre, and instead it just reveals an item if clicked in the right places. Sadly, this feels like a missed opportunity. Because of the side-scrolling gameplay style, there's virtually no exploring in the game, and you basically just walk in one direction until you either run into someone to talk to, or a cutscene, or an enemy to fight, such as these school punks. I guess Jotaro goes to the same school as Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho. The battle system is extremely simple. Before the fight begins, you pick a random tarot card that can either strengthen or weaken one or more members of your team. Then you can attack any enemy you choose, which will either hit or miss your opponent for HP damage. Additionally, you can talk, which does the same thing except with a threat or insult that hits for MP damage instead. MP, I assume, stands for mental points. At first I thought that MP just affected your stats, but I discovered later that losing all your MP is actually another method to fall in battle. The most interesting action from this limited set of options is check. Oftentimes using it will just have your character sit there and not do anything, but occasionally they'll get an idea. This unlocks the submenu tactics, which contains the idea, guts, and sometimes run. Guts allows your character to perform a more powerful attack, and run is self-explanatory, but idea is something that only works in a specific situation. Most of the time it won't lead to anything, but you actually must check and then use the idea option in order to win some fights, usually against other stand users. It actually helps to know the source material here. For instance, Kakyoin is the one who figures out how to defeat Death 13 in the show, so he's the one who needs to come up with the idea in battle if you want to win. Otherwise, this fight seems to be unwinnable. The gameplay itself isn't all that amazing, meaning that the game mostly relies on its story to keep you interested. In a way, it actually follows the original quite closely, taking everything virtually step by step. But on the other hand, there's a lot of bizarre changes. For instance, in the anime and manga, the group come across a strange chimp on a huge ship whose stand actually ends up being the vessel itself. But in the game, the chimp stand is revealed to be this spooky vampire-filled mansion that's right down the street from Jotaro's house. This theme of running into random stand users in the wrong places and visiting numerous mansions that never existed before continues throughout the game. But the most ridiculous change of all comes before the final fight with Dio. Throughout the game, you find clothing items that can be equipped by your different party members in order to increase their stats, Jotaro having a preference for caps. Just before facing off against Dio, you find one final item in the chest, the time cap. As soon as you equip it, Jotaro asks why his friends have stopped moving for a moment. Yeah, I think you might see where this is going. So in the manga and anime, Dio's incredibly overpowered stand ability is revealed to be the power to stop time, making him seemingly unbeatable, until Jotaro unlocks the same ability with his own stand. However, it seems that this game has decided to explain how he was able to do this, with a little detail that the original story left out. Apparently it was this magical hat that he found that gave him the ability to stop time. Brilliant. There isn't really too much else to say about the game. The graphics actually look pretty nice for Super Nintendo, and the story is surprisingly faithful to the original most of the time. But the animation is extremely minimal, the strange gameplay limits you from doing much, and the random vampire matches that seem to be placed just as filler and to have somewhere to throw in the random stand users does take a lot of points away from the fun factor. There also seems to be a glitch at the status screen where if you press the wrong button it soft locks the game, forcing you to restart from wherever you last saved. The patch notes claim that this was already present in the original game, so if that's true, then this is an absurd bug to leave in the final product. Then again, the patch notes also say that Joseph is Jotaro's dad when it's actually his grandfather, so who knows. If you're a big Stardust Crusaders fan, then you may find yourself enjoying this game, if at least to amuse yourself with all the silly changes. But if you're just looking for another RPG to play, I can't promise that this is the one for you. If what you've seen interests you, then give it a shot.
Well, that was JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for the Super Famicom. It definitely delivered on the bizarre aspect. Anyway, that's going to be it for this month's review. I'll see you next time on my winter special. How many days until that comes out, you ask? How many breads have you eaten in your life? Probably just at the end of the month like usual. See you then.
J-Reviews, J-Reviews, he plays lots of games. J-Reviews, J-Reviews, he is cool.
Hey guys, welcome to J Reviews. Well, it's the end of the year, so I figured that I'd try some new kind of game for once, while also wanting something that would match with the wintertime. What I have here, new and in the box, is Eskimo Bob for the NES, starring Alfonso. Okay, so I do NES games all the time, so what's so special about this? Well, this NES game was actually made very recently. Yeah, they're actually what I think you'd call a homebrew. This brand new NES game comes in the box and even has its own manual. Yeah, this thing is really legit. In fact, I don't think I've ever held a brand new NES game in the plastic before. Kind of feels like it'd be a shame to open it. Luckily, this game is also available for Steam at a very low price. Well, without further ado, let's check this game out.
It may be hard to imagine today, but there was a time when YouTube didn't exist. That's right, before the internet was dominated by Let's Players and vloggers, many people found entertainment in the simple flash cartoons of the early 2000s. Among these classic cartoons, of course, is Eskimo Bob, which made its debut in 2001 on the biggest animation sites of the time. The show features the everyday lives of fish-loving Bob and his friend Alfonso, who has an affinity with the stick that he carries around everywhere he goes. The show features a variety of characters that range from animals that you might find in the Antarctic to oddities that can't really be explained out of context. Eskimo Bob is kind of similar to that long-running Homestar Runner series, in that you might not find the appeal in any standalone episode, but as you watch more and more, the style of the humor grows on you, and the characters become more endearing. You might be asking, why did a relatively obscure 15-plus-year-old web series suddenly get turned into its own NES game? Well, the creator wanted to, and why not? The menu is your standard NES fare with New Game, Continue, and Password. But interestingly, it also has an option to view the manual. This is a nice addition for those that don't own a physical copy, But of course, there's nothing like flipping through the actual booklet. Here we get the story, a description of our heroes and their abilities, and the various enemies that you'll be facing throughout the game. The story is that Bob and Alfonso's good pal the seal has gone missing, so they set out to find him. Sure, it's kinda basic, but it gets the job done. The game plays as a side-scrolling platform puzzle game, and the goal of each level is to collect all the fish to progress, all while avoiding the many enemies and obstacles. If anything hazardous hits you even once, you lose a life, and then you have to start the level all over. You play as both Bob and Alfonso, who you can switch between using these igloos. Bob has a stronger jump and can break ice blocks of snow beneath him. Alfonso has a weaker jump but can attack enemies with his stick and break blocks of snow in front of him. This means you have to utilize both characters in order to make it through many of the stages. Assuming you're using an NES controller like I am, there's only 2 buttons plus the D-pad to move. A lets you jump, while B allows each character to perform their unique actions. Besides that, characters can also duck and crawl with the D-pad. The levels start off extremely simple to ease you into the gameplay, but eventually become quite difficult with more and more complex puzzles and challenges. Fans of the series will recognize most of the enemies who stay satisfyingly true to character. For example, Maurice the pigeon flies across the screen and will purposely poop when passing over you, turning around to repeat the process whenever bumping into a wall. The game does a great job with gradually ramping up the difficulty with each level. For instance, at first Maurice isn't much of an issue and can be avoided easily during the earlier stages, but later on you start being forced to walk on higher platforms that make it seemingly impossible to avoid his droppings. Another thing I like about this game is that while we see the same enemies and objects start to repeat themselves after a while, it still manages to change things up from level to level. Some levels focusing more on the puzzles, while others start to resemble platforming challenges. If you're used to playing Super Mario, the controls may seem a tad stiff at first, as with many puzzle platformers, but the gameplay is actually quite solid once you get the hang of it. There may be times when you're wondering how to avoid a certain obstacle or enemy in order to grab some fish, but you're unable to take much time to sit and think since you're also constantly avoiding something else at the same time. There's 64 levels in all, and every 16th level you face off against a boss, revealed to be one of the Martians responsible for kidnapping the seal. They look kinda like sentient hot dogs. Using Bob, you must avoid the alternating patterns of the Martian's attack while also making sure not to run into any of the basic enemies that may be in the room along with it. Then you must attack the boss from above. It may be overwhelming at first, but once you figure out the pattern of the room, all it takes is some cautious skill. 4 hits and each boss goes down. Oh, except for the final one, of course. Mr. Mustache Martian here is the final boss, and good lord is he difficult. Instead of having just a straight vertical and horizontal shot like the other bosses, he adds a diagonal shot as well. If that wasn't enough, you're tasked with avoiding the most annoying enemies in the game, which switch out after every 2 points of damage dealt. Remember, just 1 hit and you have to start all over. This is where the live system actually started to bug me a bit. After running out of lives, you're taken back to the main menu, where you must hit continue to proceed back to where you were. While this isn't that big of a deal normally, and many NES games did this anyway, it becomes really frustrating when you're getting into the groove of fighting the final boss and then suddenly you have to wait an extra 5 seconds to get back into the action. At first, the enemy spawns seemed to be completely random. Sometimes they would be out of the way and less an issue, and others they would be right on top of the boss's weak point. I eventually discovered, however, that they seem to spawn depending on where the last set of enemies were before the boss takes damage. Using this strategy in mind, I slowly discovered the best times to attack and damage the boss so that the next set of enemies wouldn't make things any more impossible than they already felt. It may take try after try after try, even after learning all the patterns, but if you keep at it, you should eventually win. This is one of the most frustrating final bosses I've ever faced, but that's exactly what you should expect when playing Nintendo. I must admit that puzzle platforming isn't exactly my preferred genre, which sets a high bar for these types of games to really entertain me. Lost Vikings being the only one I could think of off the top of my head right now. Eskimo Bob was thankfully an enjoyable experience for me overall. I love games with simple concepts that increasingly get more difficult over time, and combined with a solid platforming engine, this game definitely delivered. Some levels took longer to complete than I would have liked, but it always felt satisfying when they were finally completed. This is a puzzle platformer that gets a big thumbs up from me. Good job.
Well, my friends, that was Eskimo Bob starring Alfonso. If you're a fan of simple yet challenging puzzle platformers, then I'd recommend you give this one a try. It's pretty fun. Well, this marks the end of 2017 and the final J reviews for the year. Here's hoping that 2018 turns out great for everyone. So thanks for watching, and see you next year.